Thanks for tuning in, guys. You're listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Greg Driver. I'm joined by Rahul Johnny and Leon Everett. Let's go! Hi, welcome to the show. This is episode number 48, and today we are here specifically to discuss the new Netflix series that we've been so excited for so long, and that is the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But before we get lost in the woods of Greendale, I should introduce my co-hosts. So I am joined by Rahul.
Good evening, everyone.
Leon.
Hey, guys.
And we also have a special guest with us today, and that is Vicki Madden. Thanks for joining us, Vicki.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Okay, so...
Well, let me explain how we know Vicki.
Go ahead.
I mean, how I know Vicki. So Vicki and I met at the wedding of a mutual friend, though we didn't really get that much time to get to know each other then, as we were both quite busy doing our various wedding duties. Because if I remember correctly, you were the bridesmaid.
I was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I was playing the part of the tag-along boyfriend, because that mutual friend is also my girlfriend's, one of my girlfriend's very good friends. And I was trying my very best to be like really friendly and useful foreigner, because I had nothing else to do in that role. But anyway, like after the wedding, we added each other on Facebook, and it was through that I learned that you're a fan of the macabre, that you're a horror host of the highest esteem. And I think even that might be Yeah, well, no, I was going to say I think I might be underselling it, because if I remember correctly, the first time I noticed was on a Facebook post that you made hosting a horror movie screening for the Babadook, I believe, at the University of Edinburgh, and having a conversation with you on that thread. So from that point, Vicki, do you mind telling us about your relationship with horror and the place that it holds in your life at the moment?
Sure. I guess since I was a kid, I've always been a horror fan. I think my dad's idea of, a bedtime story was Edgar Allan Poe, and my mom's was Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. So macabre has always been a part of my life. And I think just when I got to uni, it became more of a research interest of mine, and eventually when I decided I was going to do a PhD, I was like, well, I have to do Gothic studies. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I've always been a horror fan, and I think actually when I started dating my husband, like years and years ago, it was more of like a dare-based thing where we were both trying to be cool to the other person by saying, oh, I love horror films, I don't scare easily, and we were both terrified in the beginning, and it kind of just led up from there.
So is your husband a fan of horror movies as well, or horror in general?
He is, but he won't go to the cinema to watch them because he actually jumps out of his seat. So he refuses to come with me. But we have great discussions about them. I think he's very intelligent when it comes to horror as well, and knows quite a lot and loves his slasher villains. So we have that in common.
So if it's not ousting either of you too much, what were the kind of things that you both tried to impress each other with?
Well, we had a list of like 100 top horror films, and all the ones that we hadn't seen, like that not both of us had seen, we were like, we need to watch these. And so I think we started with Evil Dead, and went from there. And then eventually I think it escalated to, Alien, which I never had an interest in. Oh. And then it terrified me. And I remember watching it for the first time thinking, like, I went into it thinking this is, a sci-fi film, and I'm not sure I'm a fan of sci-fi, and turns out I am, so.
I think that's a very good introduction to, like, horror sci-fi as well, particularly.
Yeah, it's great. The visuals are stunning, so. Love it.
And so my next question was going to be, how much relationship do you have with comics in general?
Very limited, I have to say. I tried to do some research before this, and I actually find them quite tricky to track down, just as a layman, I suppose. But I've not really had much experience with comics in general, and let alone horror comics.
It is very hard to know where to begin, and in fact, that's why our very first episode of Ace Comicals is how to get into comic books. After you've done the recording, if you want to go back and check that out, that would be cool. And so, Greg, where should we go on to next?
Yeah, so comics kind of has a tough entry point, and I guess it's yeah, it's not to go too much into it because we cover it in episode 1, but it's like it can be like a thing when you walk into a comic shop and you don't know where to start because everything's in the top hundreds or like number 10 or something like that, and it's just like, oh. But yeah, so I guess I should ask everybody today what they've been up to for the past 2 weeks since we've last spoken to people. So what kind of comics adjacent things have we been doing? Apart from obviously watching Sabrina, which is the subject of the show, which we'll get onto in a moment. Have we read, played, or done anything else that has been comics adjacent or anything along those lines that we'd like to discuss or talk about? So I will start with Vicki.
I've been watching some Riverdale, which I suppose is another one of those Archie comic adaptations.
Yes.
So that's probably as comic adjacent as it gets for me.
Ray?
No, I totally fell off the Riverdale wagon, but I've been, apart from Sabrina, what else have I been doing? I've been playing a lot of, I got a bit tired of playing kind of story-based games, and I wanted something that was just hands-on and tactile, so I played a lot of Endless Space 2, which is like a space-themed 4X game, so kind of like Civilization, but in space, and that's been cool to dive into, but definitely not comics adjacent for me this last fortnight.
And Leon?
Nothing. No, it's been a mix of things because there was the weekend that Sabrina came out. It felt like Netflix just were premiering a million different things. So, and I'm already behind with some stuff. So, been sort of catching up on Riverdale, catching up on The Good Place. Both of those we've spoken about before in different ways on this cast. There's a new show called Patriot Act with Hassan Minaj, who's used to be a Daily Show correspondent. If you're familiar with the Daily Show, it's like a comedy news program where they sort of pretend to be newscasters, but it's all done through a comedic lens. But the thing that, especially during the Jon Stewart years, a couple of years ago, the thing that was really good about it is that using that comedy lens, they're able to sort of address some really good subjects without having to have really the weight of like a newscast and some of the shackles of that. And it led to years and years of like really good quality late night analysis and just comedy. And since then, a bunch of Daily Show alumni have gone to different shows, and the latest one is Hassan Minaj. And yeah, I haven't seen the latest episode, but 2 episodes in, and yeah, he's definitely instead of it being say Last Week Tonight Part 2 or even Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, but the Netflix version. Instead, he's got his own spin on it, and it reminds me a lot of his stand-up special, which is also on Netflix, Homecoming King. So yeah, been really checking that out. And not to go too deep into it, but me and Rahul pretty much decided to keep up with the NBA this season, and it's been good, but it's been a Herculean task because there are a million games.
It's been an uphill struggle because there's not enough time in the day to begin with, let alone introducing a whole new season of a thing that I'm not even used to watching. Like, I'm not used to watching sports in general. Yeah. So it's been a learning process, but it's been loads of fun catching up on that. And Leon, thanks for bringing up Patriot Act, because that is something I've really enjoyed lately, and I just fell out of my head. But I'm in love with that man. I'm so glad to see him on stage doing his thing. And surrounded, in the setting of the way he does that show, where he's up on stage and he's walking about and he's addressing the audience, and there's all these amazing informatics happening on this giant screen behind him. It's such a interesting way to present that information, and to hear it coming from him, I adore.
I keep telling myself that I'm going to start watching ice hockey on the subject of attending sports, but I never, because I'm always interested in it, and I'm always interested in the whole ice hockey thing. Ice hockey always looks cool to me, but I've never actually gotten around to watching any of it, and I really want to start getting into ice hockey and start watching ice hockey, but I keep It's just something I've never gotten around to. But yeah, on the subject of starting to watch sports, but things I've done in the past 2 weeks, well, I guess it's just a week for me because, I don't know if did you guys see this weird episode that went up last week on our website? It was like, someone had got hold of my recorded equipment on Halloween.
Oh, that one with the attic dweller.
Yeah, like, I've had to have, like, the boys in beige round with their proton packs to try and find out what's going on up here, you know? Like...
Did you change your password?
Yeah, I changed all my password and everything, because obviously there's this supernatural being, the loft dweller, probably lives in one of these cupboards or somewhere, I don't know. But yeah, I've been reading a bunch of comics over Halloween, horror books, put out the Halloween episode last week, which you can check out. That's what I've done in the past 2 weeks. And I've also, kind of like semi-binged Sabrina and finished off, Haunting of Hill House this weekend as well, which...
Ooh, good shout.
It took me 5 episodes to actually, like, get into it, but it was alright. It was good.
It took you 5 episodes and a berating from me to get back into it.
Yeah, because I at first I didn't like it because, I think what I struggled to get into it at first because it was too much about the people and their trauma and everything else, and like for me not enough of the spookiness going on.
Because you wanted more spooky house, didn't you?
Yeah, I wanted to know more about the house and why the house is how it is and things like that. But yeah, it was cool. And I got into it and finished it off, and I'm actually glad I actually sat through it and watched it because it's really good. Other than that, that's been about it. I've just been sitting and reading comics as I usually do. So that's been me. And that brings us into the main segment, because I was just talking about how I half binged Sabrina, and now we're into it now. So, this episode is all about the new Netflix Sabrina show, which is kind of like a companion show to Riverdale, but also not at the same time, and is an adaptation of the Aguirre Sarkassa reimagining of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is kind of like a darker, more horror take on the classic Sabrina character, which I will come to in a moment. So this show is kind of based on that, and it also shares... The writer of the comics is also the showrunner. I think I'm right, Leon?
Yes, you are correct.
Yeah, and it's also the same guy that does Riverdale.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of cross up there as well, because the comics... I've talked to you guys before about the Afterlife with Archie comics, haven't I? Which is kind of like the Archie comics zombie story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Afterlife with Archie and these Sabrina books as well, they also cross over. In kind of like, in the fact that they run side by side as companion books, but they also inhabit different universes at the same time. It's a weird, they're part of the same thing, but also not kind of thing going on there. But yeah. So, current state of Sabrina in Archie Comics at the moment is the fact that we've got 8 issues of this Archie horror, the Sabrina story on the Archie horror imprint, which is the Chilling Tales of Sabrina, and Sabrina is occasionally popping up in the current Archie books as well, notably more in the Jughead comics. Jughead has his own solo comic, and she's popped up in that a few times, and she's just kind of this Archie adjacent character who pops in and out, and she's there to kind of add a bit of fun, or a bit of a supernatural element to the proceedings of the Archie books at the moment. And that's kind of in the new Riverdale run, which was like July 2015 onwards, which was Archie, Jughead, Betty and Veronica. And I think Sabrina got a one shot, but it didn't go much further than that. I think it ended up getting cancelled. And yeah, and they've so they've kind of crossed over in places and have kept crossing over the years. Now, the sort of brief history of Sabrina and where that fits in with Archie comics. So Archie Comics is actually 79 years old. And it was founded in 1939 as MLJ magazines even, sorry, and then later became Pep Comics. Pep Comics then became Archie Comics. Archie was a character that was born in the Pep Comics, anthology that used to be published, and then later he sort of got his own thing, and then Pep Comics became Archie Comics, and we sort of move on from there. So Sabrina first appeared in Archie's Madhouse, which was kind of like an anthology book, in October 1962. It was number 22 of Archie's Madhouse, and it was like the lead story in a humour anthology, and she sort of continued to appear in this sort of like this comedy anthology book until 1969. Now, Sabrina was created by George Gladier and Dan Del Carlo, and I don't think they actually imagined that she would be as popular as she was, but she ended up getting an animated series in the 60s, which was done by Filmation as well. And she sort of made regular appearance in Archie's TV Laugh Out, which went between 69 and 85, and there was 106 issues of that. Now, the first volume of Sabrina proper, shall we say, when it was like a comic purely about Sabrina, that was between 1971 and 1983, and that ran for 77 issues. It came back shortly after, well, I say shortly after, quite a while after actually, with the debut of the live action sitcom, which is from 1996 onwards kind of time, and there was 32 issues of that between 97 and 99, and that's the one that a lot of people will remember the character from. That's the Melissa Joan Hart one, which I'm sure a lot of you probably remember, which was probably a lot of you's first experience with Sabrina as a character. And there was another comic that ran alongside that incorporated stuff from the live action, and sort of like blurred the lines there a little bit, modernized it slightly with the fashions and the way that they presented the characters as well. That ran up to 1999, and then in 2000, the final issue of this 97-99 comic functioned as a transition into the comic that when they rebooted it from number 1 again, which was in January 2000, and that was based on an animated series that sort of ran alongside that after the year 2000, which I didn't even know existed until like a few days ago, actually. Like, I
remember hearing about that, and everybody was like, meh, at the time.
Yeah. I didn't know that animated series even existed, which is weird for me, because it was like, I knew all about the Melissa Joan Hart live action, because I used to watch that like on CITV. I used to love it. Like, you watch it for Salem and Salem alone, but it was great. Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of the characters were great in that show, but Salem was definitely like star favorite.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Salem was the best thing about that show. So yeah, in January 2000 it was rebooted again from number 1, and this ran alongside the animated series. And then in 2004, this comic got a manga makeover, which, yeah, the less said about that, the better.
Yeah, we said we wouldn't bring it up, Greg.
Exactly. Yeah, we said we wouldn't bring this up, Greg.
But
now people are going to Google it.
I Googled it, so you will as well, okay? So this ended with issue 104 and ran until 2009, and it was supposedly a little bit more serious with like actual story arcs and continuing arcs and things like that, and it got published in manga volumes, I think. I think that's the story anyway. But yeah, the less said about that, the better, I guess. There was a crossover with Sonic the Hedgehog as well, actually, during that era.
No, there wasn't.
Yes, there was! Issue 28 of Sabrina was a crossover with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Oh, yeah, because in America, Sonic
was
came out
published
on
by
Archie Comics, didn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And,
I need to find that. That's going to be amazing.
No, it's not. She appears in other Archie books occasionally, as I've already mentioned. And then, this sort of like brings us up to present day, which I've already talked about, where she's been appearing in the recent Archie comics. We've got we've also got these more sort of like, these chilling tales of Sabrina comics as well, which are, published on the Archie Horror imprint, and they started in 2014. Now they're set in the 60s. It's a darker take on the characters, and it's inspired by the appearance of Sabrina in Afterlife with Archie, which is the other book by Aguirre Sacasa, which is his other Archie horror book.
And Francesco Francavilla as well.
Yes, Francesco Francavilla, who is amazing.
Wow.
He's like one of my favourite artists. He's great. So we end up with like these like this Archie horror book that it's ran for 8 issues. But that's 8 issues since 2014. And it seems to be like on a really irregular publishing schedule. And I can't, for the life of me, find out what is happening with it. Like, I've got the first volume here, which collects up to issue 5, I believe. And there's 3 issues missing from the back of it, which I've managed to catch up on. I've read these next 3 issues, but nowhere says it's being cancelled or that it's on hiatus or anything like that. But it just seems to have just sort of like gone silent, and we've not seen an issue of it for such a long time.
And it looks super doubtful that we are going to, considering that the writer is the showrunner on 2 shows at the moment.
Yeah, so he's just made himself busy with TV now, and this comic that I really like is not going to see the light of day anymore, which is bittersweet because I like his TV shows. But yeah, there we go. And yeah, that brings us up to where we are with the TV adaptation, because the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the television show that we're about to talk about, is based primarily on these comics. So these the Archie horror books is kind of where they draw most of what happens and most of the aesthetic and everything else from. Now, running up to this as well, I've noticed that Riverdale's been getting a little bit spooky. We've been getting like these the Gargoyle King, which and this whole D&D thing going on, like, and I've talked about this on previous episodes as well, that this feels to me like it's some kind of comment on Satanic Panic and the whole D&D is evil thing from the early 80s and late 70s and all that stuff. And I'm hoping that they're going to cross the two up somewhere and like bring them together in some way. That's what I'm hoping anyway. And I'm sure you're hoping the same, right, Leon?
Well, yeah, because it leads on from things that were happening in earlier seasons. So during season 1, when the show was back, I say back, when the Riverdale characters are back in the zeitgeist for the first time since ever, I guess. And we've got this TV show which everyone's hyped and excited about, and it's doing really well. The showrunner and other executive producers did mention they had plans to bring Sabrina in. I mean, we know she's in the universe, she's in the town over in Greendale. They're only separated by that Sweetwater river. So it felt like they have Josie. I mean, I know Josie's always been a bit more Riverdale centric in terms of location. It felt like, maybe season 2 they'll introduce her, and the door's open for that. And then in season 2, at the beginning, when we were still hopeful about season 2, there was just sort of this like spooky ramp up, and you had that episode with the crate, which I can't remember the name of it at the moment.
I know the one. It was like a Halloween anthology comic in a TV episode, because it did like a short segment with each like a different bunches of characters. Yeah,
and they overlap.
The Archie and Jughead section segment even was the bit where they do like some delivery of some kind of like demon or something in a crate, and it's all very Cloak and Dagger. It's all very weird and eldritch, and they've got this crate on the back of the truck, and there's some weird stuff going on.
And then you've got like, Tony Todd has this weird cameo where he's in it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
So it had this like cool spooky vibe, and also at the same time they had this storyline going on with Cheryl, my favorite character, who she seemed to like have superpowers or something. They were kind of hinting at.
Yeah.
And there were these like sort of fan, I think on Reddit where all of this gets cooked up, but there were these like fan theories of like her being spooky or whatever. She's probably going to be revealed to be a witch, and then that'll be the backdoor for Sabrina to have like a backdoor pilot and then lead on to her show, which at the time was going to be on the CW.
Yeah, I mean, there was that whole thing there's whole bits as well where Cheryl's doing like almost witchy things during the show.
Oh, Josie, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's like the whole thing where she's like there's like this scene where she's sunbathing and she's reading a book and it looks like a really old tome, like, and you're thinking that's going to be like a book of magic or something.
Yeah. It basically teased
some kind of grimoire or such. Yeah, but yeah. Listen to us, like the only two Riverdale fans here, I think. Because I'm not sure if this is an exact quote from Rahul, but something along the lines of, "I am done with Riverdale's bullshit."
I mean, I may have said it in a nicer tone than that, but the words are correct.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I kind of feel the same way. I feel like it's fallen off the wagon a little bit for me, but
yeah.
And like, I'm openly the one of the three of us who likes television the least, generally. Like, I can't sit through that many hours of the same thing. And to be fair, Riverdale was good enough for season 1 and for most of season 2 that I stuck with it for like a good 30 odd episodes, and that's saying something for me particularly. And I kind of really wish they had dived deeper into the whole Cheryl being a witch thing, or had that be the backdoor to Sabrina. I think that would have been a really cool reveal, but I mean, we got what we got.
In all fairness, the thing that's keeping me going on Riverdale right now is just Archie and Jughead and Betty. I couldn't care less about what's happening with Archie in prison right now and all that stuff. That's
Archie's
just,
in prison?
Mm.
Yeah. But the
the way you said that,
spoiler,
says a lot to me, because I feel the same.
Yeah,
it's
Archie's
a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah.
Great.
But the thing that's keeping me going right now is like Jughead and Betty, and they've been I think they've been my two favourite characters throughout the whole thing, actually, to be honest. I think Jughead and Betty are like the best. So.
Well, I mean, speaking of Jughead, and you mentioned Satanic Panic, right?
Yeah.
I hear if you play any episode of Riverdale backwards, Jughead puts his shirt back on, and that's terrible.
Moving on from there then, what is everybody's first experience with Sabrina as a character? And we'll just go around and ask you one by one. So, Vicky, we'll start with you. What is your first memory of Sabrina, first experience with Sabrina as a character?
My first experience with Sabrina was actually in the made-for-TV film Sabrina in Rome, I think it was, where she goes to Rome and has this whirlwind romance with an American dude she meets there, and there's this whole like plot where she has to something about like her aunt's locket, and she has to free her spirit or something, and it was as a young girl I loved it. It was great. And obviously Salem was the best character. So he's always been the cat of my dreams, and I'm really disappointed that my cat doesn't speak to me like that. So
yeah, he's the cat everyone wants.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And this is, I'm guessing, the Melissa Joan Hart years as well. So this will be like
it was.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I never watched the sitcom because I was living in Asia at the time, and we didn't get it there. It wasn't popular enough to be imported to China.
Oh,
we sadly.
Yeah, that's kind of sad, because it was great, and it was something that
I'm sure it was.
I think I think I had it on Nickelodeon for a while, and then when we didn't have cable, it was on Channel 3 on ITV here in the UK.
Yeah, it was.
So
it was on some sort of like morning TV show for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was on. Was it Nickelodeon in the States that it was on? Because I did eventually catch it when I was a bit older.
Yeah.
And it was still somehow magical to me. It was, it wasn't probably as funny as I would have found it when I was little, but I still really enjoyed it. It was just, the characters are so charming, and the aunts are the best, I love a good spinster aunt. Love that trope.
Well, you got two of them. So.
Yeah, exactly. Two for the price of one. Love it.
Yeah. Ray, how about you?
Yeah, it would have been, I was going to say it would have been the Melissa Joan Hart TV show, but I think that's wrong, actually. I think I've spoken on the cast about how I got into Archie, Casper, and a couple of other like Archie adjacent comics when I used to go to India. And the hotel that me and my parents always stayed at had a little shop down in the basement, and they had a huge back catalogue of these tiny Archie comics, like stacks and stacks of them. And it turns out, just at the weekend, me and Leon went to meet a mutual friend, and he also used to travel to India around the same time I did when I was quite young, and he remembered it as well. So it wasn't just a solo thing that happened to be in the one hotel that I stayed at. Like, apparently it was a countrywide thing, and it was, it was quite popular in India. So that would have been my first exposure to Archie in general. I remember like poring over those like tiny small format pocket comics. And I'm pretty sure Sabrina was in that, but I don't remember any specific examples from there. But then definitely after that was as a teenager watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch and just really digging it. Like there's a lot of charm to those characters, and everybody loves Salem, and like it was just a nice slice of life kind of stories of being a witch in a modern setting, and I just really enjoyed that. And I'm going to get to that later when we talk about the Chilling Adventures, but that's something that I was hoping for more of, that slice of life, how to deal with being a witch in the modern day.
Yeah. And Leon?
Yeah, my exposure would have been the 96 TV show. I think I had it the same way, where I watched it on Nickelodeon and then watched it on CITV, I believe. It's always weird, because in my head, I always think of it as like it was a kids program because it came on Nickelodeon. But it actually aired in prime time on ABC in America. It was like a prime time sitcom.
Oh, no way.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But, like it premiered to like 17 million viewers, which in 96 times would have made it terrible. Like, that's low. But now that's like, would be the highest rated show on TV. So like I was exposed to it that way. And then I remember I never really had a big exposure to Archie comics, but I was always aware of them. And I remember later on, maybe sometime during my teens, I can't remember where I was, in a library or something, and they had a bunch of them. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, Josie and the Pussycats, which I knew as being a Hanna-Barbera TV show. Yeah. Oh, she's part of that world. And then the same thing with Sabrina. I was like, oh, I didn't know that she was part of the comic.
Yeah.
And I'd only really seen a couple of stories where she showed up, but she was always the sort of like a side character. But mostly it's Melissa Joan Hart and the talking cat are the things that are imprinted on my memory.
Yeah, my sort of, again, like for me, like I've explained, it would have been like CITV or Nickelodeon, and it would have been the Sabrina, like the 96 sitcom. I feel like, having looked it up in prep for this show, I might have seen the Filmation cartoon at some point in my childhood, but I can't place it because it looks familiar. This is like some old 1960s cartoon that's set in the 60s, about Sabrina. But yeah, it would have been, and there's a particular episode that just sticks in my head because I think it was one that they used to rerun a lot. And it was one where they start a band, Sabrina and her friends at school. And this is the Melissa Joan Hart show again, by the way, the 96 one. And there's this whole thing where they're wearing worm costumes and they do a cover of One Way or Another. And it just like, I associate that song with Sabrina the Teenage Witch now. And it's just like stuck in my head that way. And that is what's been done to me by this show. So yeah.
This is either real or you were like buzzing off Cocoa Pops one day.
No, man, it's real. It's real. It is definitely real because I've watched this episode, like, I must have because it's one they used to rerun a lot, and I think I must have seen it at least 10 times thinking about it. But yeah, it was just like, they wear these worm costumes on stage and they do a cover of One Way or Another. And that is what stuck in my head. That was like the prevailing memory of that show. So yeah, on to the main event, which is the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is the Netflix show. So, we should start with, why were we excited for the show specifically? And I guess I'll open this up by saying that it was, I think it's the fact that I had read these Chilling Adventures comics, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and I think it was learning that they were going to do a Sabrina show and that it would be kind of based on these comics, or that the writer of these comics was going to be working on it. And I was already very excited about Riverdale by this point, because I'd already gotten into Riverdale and started watching Riverdale and was enjoying Riverdale with my enjoyment of Archie comics. And I think it was just having, knowing the comics and thinking, wow, they're going to adapt this, and this is such a great story. Like, they're really good horror comics, and if they adapt this well and they go as dark as I want them to, then it's going to be absolutely fantastic. And it really didn't disappoint. So Vicky, how did you kind of, like, your kind of hype for this show? Where did that come from?
I mean, I watch a lot of TV. If it's on Netflix, I will watch it. So I was particularly excited because I think, I think we're in kind of a new golden age of horror TV, actually, and horror's gotten obscenely smart in the last couple of years, both in terms of cinema and what's on the small screen. And I guess I'm loving that witches are finally getting their moment. I mean, I know that we probably, witches have existed for such a long time that they're always kind of in the popular imagination, but I love that they're getting the spotlight at the moment, which I think has to do with the whole concept of a matriarchy. Yeah. And I love that, from the A24 film, The Witch, to Sabrina, you've got such a range of witches depicted, and they come in all shapes and sizes, and I like that Sabrina is a 16-year-old girl. I think it's a great lead in to witches, as opposed to depicting them as, like crone. You go in the other direction and depict the Virgin, and I love that.
What was that other film? The Craft.
Oh yeah, and they're remaking that one too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think me and Leon. Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, on you go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think me and Leon were excited as well, because because we heard about this idea for Sabrina, and we kind of built this show in our heads that was kind of like a made for TV remake of The Craft.
Yeah,
but with Riverdale characters.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah. I mean, because Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, he also did the Carrie remake, didn't he? And Carrie's obviously, she, to me, is definitely a witch.
Yeah.
Of the highest order. And I love, I've written a couple of papers about witches, so they're always at the forefront of my mind anyway. I love anything to do with a witch, and I love how versatile they are, and how kind of empowering they are at the moment. I don't think they've always been an empowering figure for women, but I think at the moment, really, it's almost like a reclamation of this character and this archetype that makes her really quite fascinating, especially in this cultural moment that we're in at the moment.
Yeah.
So many moments.
Ray, your hype.
I don't know if I can follow that. I just wanted to see a very prettily shot show about cool people doing mystical things. I think, I was high off the aesthetic of Riverdale. I think that was a thing that really worked for me, like the moodiness of that show, like the heightened teen drama, all of that really worked for me. And then on top of it, it had beautiful imagery, and it was really well shot, and had this languid, syrupy pace to it, which I really liked. And I wanted to see that transposed over to, I didn't really know what to expect in terms of the horror of it all, because I hadn't read the comic at that point, when the hype was building for this show. But I trusted in the aesthetic of Riverdale coming over, and just it being about characters that I knew, but, being given a different twist. And I think generally I like that these days, where we're getting either remakes or, reinterpretations of things that we loved as children, and then giving them a darker twist, or just giving them a completely different facet to view it from. That's what got me excited. Yeah.
I guess there's a touch of that with me as well, but I think that was more... For me, it was, as I said before, it was more the comics, and knowing the comics were going to be adapted, and knowing what I know about the comics and having read the books and loving them so much. That was what the thing was for me. Leon, where did your hype come from for Sabrina?
So like we mentioned this last year in the All Hallows Eve episode that we did. And that was the first time of me rereading and completing Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Yeah.
And with Riverdale in full swing at that time, I think it would have been a few episodes. No, season 2. I'm confused. Anyway, it was a mid-season replacement. Yeah, so season 2 had just begun. And then, I think it built there from multiple ways because I really liked the book. Really liked how dark the book was compared to sort of my memories of Sabrina. And I thought, I don't think I've ever really encountered a thing where you've had the person who wrote it's probably happened it definitely happened with books a lot, with limited HBO series and such, but I've never had a thing where like the person who did the comic was also like the executive producer on the show, and that was happening with Riverdale.
Yeah.
And I knew that Aguirre Sarcasa was going to be doing that with Sabrina, so I thought, like, my mind just boggled on, like, it's... Because at the time it was just called Sabrina, and then when they announced the title, Chilling Adventure of Sabrina, I was like, holy shit. Holy shit, he's going ham, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
It's not going to mess around, and it's not going to be like, we're going to throw in some of the 90s show and throw in blah, blah. It's just like, no, it's just this take of the character with maybe a soupçon of the Riverdale sexiness in there. So I was kind of hyped for that, and I think it just built because, like I said, we had that season 2 of Riverdale at the beginning, and I was just thinking like, I'm like, they're gonna like drop her in the show, and like, which stuff, Cheryl, blah blah. And then when it was announced that, at that time, season 2 started to like feel a bit like different as they started getting up their own butts with the Red Hood stuff. And then it was announced that the show that Netflix would be fully producing it because here in the UK, Netflix have the exclusive rights to showing the CW's Riverdale show, but this was going to be a wholly Netflix effort, and that just blew my mind because I thought like, oh wow, like sort of the gloves are off in a way that they wouldn't be on network TV, and in that moment I thought, this is probably going to be better than Riverdale. Yeah. Just in the case of that, Riverdale's trying to do something different, and I've got a lot of love for Riverdale still. But, like, I didn't think that a Netflix version of the Aguirre Sarcasa Hack, Robert Hack comic, I thought they would, like, sand down the edges. And then when it was announced for Netflix, then the hype built, and then they fully got me, even before the trailer. They fully got me when they released the poster, and it's just like the white hair silhouette with the black headband and the Salem in the face with the lipstick, and I thought this is going to be my jam. I'm making no plans that weekend. Yeah, like everyone is dead to me. I think it's going to be something special. So that was my hype leading into it.
Yeah, for me it was when I saw some of the trailers. And actually got to see what they'd done with it, and I was like, okay. And then you telling me as well that it wasn't going to be on TV first, that it was going straight to Netflix, and I was like, okay, because I knew then that they would be able to like gloves off it, and they did it really well.
Can I just chime in and say a lot of my hype was stemming off of you guys being just that hype about it. Like I got excited because you guys were excited.
Yeah, I mean, it was coming up to Halloween. I love Halloween. I love spooky stuff, so it was like, that was the whole thing for me. It was like, I'm going to get this show and it's going to be fantastic, and I was really looking forward to it. But I just want to mention as well, Leon, I just want to correct you there. Did you mean the Black Hood? Because you said the Red Hood, and unless Jason Todd rocked up into Riverdale with twin pistols.
To be honest, I was expecting you to correct me as soon as it left my mouth, but I was on the roll, so I kept going.
Imagine that, Jason Todd turning up in Riverdale. Yeah. So that's pretty much like the hype building towards the show with that Halloween coming up and everything else, and everyone's kind of on board for it and whatever. And, it was just that general mood, I guess, that general Halloween mood. Cause I get really into Halloween, I like tend to carve like myriad pumpkins and put them all out in front of the house and get everything ready. Like we have like loads of, we've still got the Halloween decorations up now, actually. I've still, like, cause I've not taken them down yet. I've still got like bats in the window and like, I've got like, oh, what do you call it? Where it's like little flags. Bunting.
I was going to say
it.
semaphore, but
Little flags.
And you call yourself an Englishman.
Yeah, bunting, yeah. I've got
Love
bunting with like bats, and then I've got another one that's all skeletons and stuff, just like hanging up in the house, and we've not took them down yet. Got these little green spider lights as well, and a skeleton hanging in the window, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of Christmas for you, isn't it? Like, you don't take a
pretty
Christmas
much
tree
is.
down straight away. Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think I would ever meet someone who liked Halloween as much as I did. And having said that, I did nothing for Halloween this year because everyone was so busy and it was so disappointing.
Yeah. I didn't have, I sometimes have people over for Halloween and we just watch movies and stuff. But
I always do. It's like, since I was
Yeah.
a little girl, this has been like my favorite holiday. You know, people get excited about Christmas and I'm like, no, but Halloween you get to dress up.
Yeah,
And you get to dress up as spooky things and no one can judge you.
Halloween comes first. It comes before Christmas.
Exactly.
Can't think about Christmas until Halloween's done. And
Well, I mean, for me, I didn't really
Yeah.
grow up with Halloween, but I had a really good one a couple of years ago where it fell on the same week as Diwali. So we had
wow.
Diwaliween, where we got pumpkins and we put like orms and swastikas into them and stuff, and it was really cool. Like, we normally do like paintings made out of colored sand, right? And so we did loads of spooky orange and black themed ones because like it just seemed appropriate to merge the two things together. So that's the best Halloween I've had.
That's incredible.
that sounds
that was
awesome.
really
Yeah.
You should do that every year on the weekend that falls between the two.
Well, I mean, I feel like it was special because it happened to fall on almost the same day. So
Yeah.
I feel like the next time, like, it'll be like the blood moon, you know, where
Yeah.
it's a special occasion. So
Yeah.
I'll let you guys know for the next one.
Yeah, I'd love to celebrate that with you. That sounds great.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, like I've always loved Halloween since I was a kid actually as well. Like my thing was growing up with the Ghostbusters and from a very early age wanting to be a Ghostbuster, and that was my introduction to the supernatural and the paranormal and everything else, and obsessed with it since then. I used to read books about like the unknown and about hauntings. I used to scare myself actually with this stuff when I was a kid because I used to have this book about vampires that used to petrify me that I think I've told you guys about this before, haven't I, Ray?
Yeah.
Where I would read it and then I would hide it on top of my wardrobe so I wouldn't have to look at it when I was falling asleep. You know,
I mean,
it's like,
Greg, sometimes you tell me the story when you're drunk, let alone like when it's appropriate for the cast.
that vampire book
I know this
scarred
story
me
quite
for
well.
life, but it was a cool book, and I'm annoyed that I can't find it now because I really wish I still had it. It was called like the Vampire Scrapbook or something, and it was like all about vampire, like different stuff about vampires, and it was presented in kind of like a fact book kind of way.
Vicky,
So,
you have access
different
to
types of
scholarly
vampires and
articles,
stuff.
right?
And I do, yeah.
Yeah, you could go.
Yeah,
search
I
that for
should.
me.
I know. I really should. Because that sounds great. I mean, I've never found vampires scary. And then in high school, I read Salem's Lot, like just a couple of days before Halloween, and I was so scared that I had to go out and buy myself a cross. That was how scared I was.
Wow.
It was, I know, it was a life-changing experience because, you know, vampires aren't, especially now, they're so defanged that they're hardly scary anymore. You know, we get sparkly vampires now, not menacing ones that show up at your window in the middle of the night. So
I think I was more scared of vampires than anything else, as far as stuff like that was concerned. Oh, poltergeists! Poltergeists scared me because you don't see them.
Yeah,
They just
poltergeist
do
is my
stuff.
thing.
Yeah, the two things that used to scare me when I was a kid was vampires and poltergeists specifically.
I think I told you the story of how I watched, when I was like 5 years old, I watched Terminator 2 and Ghost on the same night for Eid. And Ghost scared me way more than Terminator. It's like when he's pushing that coin and it freaked me the fuck out. Yeah, I hated it. I don't think I've ever watched it since, actually. I'm gonna have to go back.
that is so funny.
It's not. It's terrifying.
No, because to me, that's another one of those films where, you know, ghosts are sexy as opposed to scary.
I mean, Patrick Swayze was kind of scary for a 5-year-old as well, so.
So what we're saying here is that Ghost is the Twilight of its time.
Do you know what? I think you've got a point there because that what Twilight did to vampires, I feel like Ghost did to ghosts. Like it's just such a terrible, like schmaltzy film that I happen to really enjoy watching from time to time.
Yeah. It's been ages since I've seen Ghost actually, but yeah. So that was my thing. Like vampires. I used to be petrified of vampires as a kid, and Ghostbusters, as well as introducing me to stuff that frightened me, also helped me deal with stuff that frightened me. So that was cool, because I had the whole thing in my head about there are ways to stop these things. Maybe like when I'm older and I can become a scientist and build this stuff, you know. But yeah, so I actually, like, going back to Sabrina again, I actually kind of, as I was saying earlier in the show, I semi-binged the show. So I sort of watched it in kind of like 3 episode bursts, because me and Sophie would sit down and we'd do one episode and we'd be like, oh, we can't leave it there. We've got to watch another one. So we'd watch another one, and we actually finished it on Halloween night. That was our October 31st. Like, we had like the bowl of sweets for kids on the middle of the coffee table, and we were just waiting for the door to knock and just pausing Netflix when the door knocked. And we kind of like watched the last 4 episodes back to back, and also ate the majority of the sweets that we were meant to be giving out. So that was cool. Yeah, so that's kind of like my experience with the way I watched it. I kind of like semi-binged it. So, Vicky, did you binge it, or did you pace yourself, or?
I think I did all 10 episodes at once. And it's more of like a, can I do this for 10 hours straight? Was it 10 episodes, or was it fewer actually? I can't remember, but I did all of them at once.
Yeah, it was 10.
It was definitely 10.
I think I started in the morning because I knew when it was going to come out. And the best thing about doing a PhD is, like, if you don't feel like doing work that day, you can pass off watching a horror show as your research. So, I mean, this is what I tell myself. So yeah, I kind of just went for it. And it wasn't, I mean, I found the first half, I think, more binge worthy than the second half, but I suppose you can get into that more later.
Yeah, Ray, did you binge it, or did you pace
Greg,
yourself?
I started off with such good intentions. I watched like 2-3 episodes in a row, and I was like riding high off it, and then I just fell off the wagon, and I basically watched 5 episodes yesterday. Like, I had to stay up really late to watch them all and like fit them in, because I just couldn't. I didn't have the stomach for like that many hours of something in a row. And again, I'll get into this a little bit later, but I think I was initially quite disappointed with, or not quite disappointed, a little bit disappointed with the show. And then I felt like, opposite to Vicky, I think it ramped up towards the end for me a bit more. But maybe that's because I watched like the final episode on a train, and I was literally going up a ramp.
Yeah, so you watched it on a little phone screen on the train.
I mean, I've got a nice phone. It was nice and bright, and like I held it really close to my face. So. Oh
my god, phones are the devil for that.
I apologize. I wouldn't do that for, like, generally I wouldn't do that, but I had a deadline.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Leon, how did you watch?
So, like I was saying, in the run, I was mega hyped, and the plan was, I didn't want to go too hardcore, because when I used to live in Bristol, me and my flatmate would sometimes go too hard on these shows. And like Orange is the New Black would come out, or something, whichever it was at the time, and we'd end up watching 5 episodes on the Friday night, go to bed really late, and then cancel all our plans on Saturday and finish the show in 2 days. So I wasn't going to go that hardcore, but I did want to watch like 3 episodes on the Friday, and then divvy out the rest on Saturday and Sunday and be done. And instead, I ended up watching 2 on the Friday, and I thought, like, yeah, cool. I'll continue this tomorrow. But and I did start to binge, but I think part of it is I wasn't sat on a sofa, so I wasn't waiting for Netflix to do the Are You Still Watching? Instead, I was sat on my computer. So after every episode, I would click the screen so that it didn't skip to the next episode, because I like watching all the way to the end on end credits. It's a weird thing I like to do. So, and then that gives you a natural sort of stopping point. So I would use that to like go to the bathroom, blah, blah. And then I started to get more like, it was this mix of different feelings of like, oh, I don't want to rinse it all and it be gone. But at the same time, like, I don't know, I just wanted to like, stretch my legs, catch up on the Good Place, like change it up, because like, I think, one of the we'll go into it more later, but one of the good things with is sort of it's made to be a thing where you continue watching every episode.
Yeah.
It's not exactly cliffhangers. Some are cliffhangers, but it's made to propel you forward in this way.
Yeah.
But I kind of was wanting to reject that in some way and not do it that way. So that weekend I watched the 8 episodes, and then in the week I finished the last 2.
See, I found it far too easy to binge watch it, even though we had guests at that weekend before Halloween. Like Sophie's parents were visiting and her brother, and we're still watching Sabrina. It's like we're still sitting there watching it, like binging it. It's like we found, like, the only thing that I think stopped us from doing probably all 10 episodes in one day was the fact that we had people.
Actually, one of my favorite moments about this whole week or two since Sabrina's come out was on day 1, the Friday when it came out. Me and Leon had been watching it, and we were teasing you about how much you love the intro because of the Robert Hack visuals and everything. And that was a lot of fun, Greg, I have to admit.
Yeah, because you'd started watching it and I hadn't started watching it by that point, and I was like, I really want to watch it. And the intro is beautiful. It is an amazing intro for that show. I watch the intro every time. Like, I skip the credits but watch the intro. And yeah, it's just a side note, actually. When you're watching a show with someone, have you guys ever experienced the look of betrayal, like when you watch an episode without them? Like, you know, like when you watching a show and then, like, they will have to go to work or do something else, but then, like, you'll get home before them or something, or you will, and you'll just start watching the next episode without thinking, without remembering that you're watching it with someone else, and then they will catch you doing that. Have you ever had that happen to you?
No, because I'm too scared of doing that.
Not that I mean, I don't do this. I wouldn't do this. But if I did, I wouldn't put it on air. I wouldn't record it on this show, so, like, for anyone to throw back in my face. Are you trying to say that you've had the glare of disgust
with the Marvel shows? Yeah, like I'll start watching, like, when the new season of Daredevil. Like, I was like halfway through an episode of Daredevil before Sophie woke up, and I was downstairs with a coffee, and she came, and I was just like, "You started watching it without me." So I have rewinded it to the start of the episode. Like, there was no big argument or anything, but it's just that kind of, like, it becomes like betrayal, doesn't it, when you do that? Like, you watch it without them and you've been watching it with them, and it's like, yeah.
We wouldn't know, Greg. We're not terrible people.
I'm not a terrible person.
My husband knows not to trust me with these things. Like, I'm always miles ahead of him because, you know, while he's at work, working very hard, I'm at home with Netflix. So he knows I'm not to be trusted, and therefore he has just come to live with it.
Yeah, I think if it happens in this house, we've got to the point where you just go back to the point where the other person was at and you watch it with them without talking about it.
Yeah, without, like, dwelling too much on the point. Like, I had a similar thing with The Haunting of Hill House, where, like, this happens a lot with me and Anna, where I'll start something and then realize, like, maybe 3-4 episodes in, that she would actually really like it, and then I have to make my case to her to say, like, actually, if you guarantee that you're going to watch every episode with me, I'll go back and watch the first 4 episodes again with you. And generally, I like doing that. If it's something I like so much, happy to watch it twice, you know. And that's normally how it goes. We get, like, I get a third of the way through, realize it's something for her, bring her in, and we start again. So.
Yeah. Let's go to overall impressions of the show. So, I actually, like, overall, I really, really, really enjoyed this, and I was impressed with it, actually, in the way that they've adapted the material from the comic. They've adapted it, obviously, with some differences. Like, it's not exactly the same, but the main beats are there, and they follow the main beats, and the main themes are there with, like, the whole necromancy thing and everything else. It's all there. And it's a very, very good adaptation, and it also does the thing that I like that Riverdale does, where it kind of has, like, subtle nods to the comic and the history of the characters and things like that. Just kind of like little subtle, like, pokes and nods and points and things like that kind of, like, if you know about that stuff, then you'll get it and you'll be like, oh yeah. And it's nice to see that stuff come up. It's like the examples from Archie was, I guess I can talk about examples from Riverdale. I can talk about this because it's kind of like a whole season ago or whatever. And the Archie Archie's Red Circle. Now, Red Circle was an Archie Comics imprint that published, I think they published like sort of like horror comics for a time and also some superhero comics on that imprint. And then Archie has like this group called the Red Circle in the show, and it's that kind of thing, those kind of like little things that they drop in these shows that I really enjoy, and that was like something that kept me watching as well. Vicky, what was your overall impression of it?
I liked it in general. I think. I definitely thought it started out stronger than it finished for me anyway. But on the whole, I thought it was really strong. I liked the casting. I thought was particularly great. Everyone I thought was really, really convincing in their roles. But plot wise, I don't know, things kind of felt at the end like they were meant to be very high stakes, but for me the stakes were just very low. Again, I struggle with that with Riverdale as well. So it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. It was that I wanted more, I think, is what I would say.
Yeah. Like for me it was the elements I did like about it were these little subtle nods and things like that. And I don't think there was a start to finish for me. It just seemed to like be quite strong all the way through. I don't think, for me, it didn't have a weak moment, as in there wasn't a point where I thought this is dropping off slightly or anything like that. I think for me it started strong and it finished strong. And I quite enjoyed, some of the wackier moments in it as well, because there's points where it's almost funny instead of horrific, like some of the Hilda Zelda moments, which are really good. But yeah, we'll go into that when we get to later on, because we're gonna have a spoiler section. But there's some really good, like I think Hilda is very well cast. I really like Hilda in this show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hilda and Ambrose, I think, are my two favorite characters in this.
Sure.
Ray, how about you?
Yeah, so kind of echoing what Vicky said, actually, although I think we're flipped on like the half of the show that we enjoyed more. Like I do feel like the plot sort of meandered for a long time. Like the thing that initially attracted me was, like you said, the cast, the characters are amazing. Like I love who these people are and, you know, what they're going through and like the life that they live. But it was more like a narrative or pacing issue I had with the first few episodes, where it didn't drag me along. I felt, and this is a complaint I have with a lot of things, like I can watch movies and feel really out of the frame, like really not engaged with it, because they're just not feeding me information at the right pace. So I think there's stuff about like how much Sabrina already knows at this point, you know, at the age of 15, about the history of witches, about the history of her family. And it kind of doesn't mesh with what we see with her, like, confidence towards witchery or towards magic in general. There's stuff like that which just it resonated wrongly with me, and that pulled me out of it. But, like, overall, I really enjoyed it. I love the aesthetic of it, and, like, I think we talked about this on the last episode, in fact, where that's something that can really drag me along. Like, just the mood and tone of a thing can really bring me into it. Like you said, Greg, I think there were points where they like, mixed horror and comedy in interesting ways, which is, you know, that's the thing that horror does generally, like, you know, stuff like Sam Raimi, which I think there were points where this show was like channeling that kind of comedy horror, but some points just didn't work for me. Like there were moments where it felt too much like early Buffy and not enough like The Evil Dead, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So did it have, because there's points that gave me, like, you bring up Sam Raimi, there was points in it that gave me, like, Drag Me to Hell vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
Film,
I mean, there was stuff about that whole, like, comically dark, where something is disturbing but also funny, but you can't help but laugh with a look of terror on your face. And I think that's what they were aiming for in certain places, and I don't think they quite pulled it off. But then, at the same time, I'm being very harsh on it, because for every moment where I felt like they didn't quite nail the tone, for me at least, I think there were 10 more which, like, really sold that like, I don't know, the sexy vibe that they had in Riverdale, like Leon was saying. Like, that really worked.
It was just, it felt like a mood that I could dip into, because it was kind of like, perfect for this time of year and whatever. Like I say, Sabrina, the show felt like a mood I could dip into, and I think for me it kind of nailed it. When you bring up Sabrina's confidence or underconfidence, I don't know which way you were playing it there with magic. Do you mean that she was overconfident, or like what was the?
Not so much about confidence, but like what her knowledge base is. I think like stuff like that really matters to me to get me to connect with the character. Like I didn't, and part of it is just, being a teenager and having overconfidence, which is definitely something that plays in towards the second half of the show, which I really liked. Like that's something I really loved about her character, where I don't want to say too much before spoilers, but that thing, especially early on, where I don't think they expressed well enough what her capability is and what her capability should be for somebody who's grown up as not just a witch, but a half witch. Like I just wasn't, I don't think that was clear. And I think it stopped being important after the halfway mark anyway. And that's, I think, when I was more on board. For
me, it came across well that she was, she'd grown up as a mortal in mortal school, but had powers, and she kind of like had messed around with these powers at home, and I can imagine she was probably taught bits by her aunts and things like that, but as I say, we'll go into that later. But Leon, your overall impression of the show?
Yeah, I mean, listeners would probably sigh, because it's always the general thing with me, whereas like overall I had a really good time with the show, and I don't know, like from the intro I'm like on board. The intro really like gears you up and gets you set up, and I think that the theme, the visuals, the Robert Hack sort of motion comic visuals, they're just done so well, and I like that they have that focus on the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina comic, while bringing in some of the color and light, say from the show in a way. So like that immediately sort of really warmed me to the show, and every episode as it came up, it really like sort of like geared me up. And yeah, generally like I had a good time with the show, and I'll skim over some of my like general thoughts on it. I've got more to say in spoilers, but yeah, I mean like, yeah, it definitely gives me like serious like Buffy vibes, though it's not a shop. It's more like not too much, but it's like it's someone inspired by, but it doesn't have, say, sort of the cutting commentary that Whedon and his other writers would inject. I wouldn't be as harsh to say like early, like season 1-ish Buffy, but it definitely is like gesturing to that way. But like, oh yeah, but it's done by the Riverdale people, and it's not meant to be as harsh a thing, a burn, I guess, as it probably will sound. But I do have that feeling. It was all very surface level and light in some areas, while getting like mega deep in other areas. But yeah, I mean, I'm a massive Buffy fan, and I'm here for anything sort of taking influence from it. But yeah, it's a mix of that really. But it's like it has a hint of, say, that out of time Americana that you get with Riverdale, where it could be set in the 50s or now, and it is. Where like they purposely sort of keep it timeless in that way, which I really like.
I don't know if I agree with you, the fact that Riverdale's timeless. I mean, this is probably a conversation for another time, but Riverdale feels very, very modern.
In some ways, but I mean, I think the aesthetics are very historical then. So they have modern people, but then you go to hospitals and everyone's dressed to how they were in the 50s and such, and the cars are generally older style cars, just like in this. Yeah. So I guess what I mean like that is more like a stylistic option than I guess more thematic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like it has that plus the sort of like high melodrama that Riverdale has, that's a bit more grounded in this, which is weird because this is the fantasy show. And it has like, especially more, I guess throughout actually, it has that sort of hyper referentialness of Riverdale, where if anything will date it, and not really in a negative way, but it's like everyone has seen everything. So like movies, books, everything. Like And it's really cool because the references in this aren't just pop culture; they are sort of like occult history and just general like magic and different historical figures. So I really like that. I will say in terms of the flow of the show. I know I felt what Rahul and Vicki are feeling in terms of you wanted more of a sort of slice of life. That's what you thought you wanted when you went into the show, Rahul. And I think because the show is more focused on the adventure, it sort of half-asses the slice of life to a degree, and then that leads to world building just ending up being sacrificed to exposition dumps. And there's certain things they do throughout the show we'll talk about later that I think saves it from the worst of that in terms of how it deals with, say, the supporting characters. But it definitely does suffer from that. And as a typical Netflix show, it's too long. But none of this was enough to make me not enjoy an episode, even though they were often 60 minutes long.
Too long? Too long?
Yeah, definitely.
10 episodes wasn't enough.
No, well, I would have preferred 10 episodes of meat rather than, say, 7 episodes of meat and 3 episodes of fat. Because, it's uneconomical in how it handles some stuff. But like I said, I was never sort of tapping my arm where my watch would be. But, it wasn't as tight as it could be. And if it wanted to have the exact same time, they could have used some of that time a bit more efficiently and spent more time with more interesting characters and less time with boring, uninteresting characters. But going to what Vicky was saying about the stakes, I think because it's stuck in that adventure and because because the slice of life loses out to the adventure, we don't really know much about the town apart from when someone speaks about it in the monologue for 5 minutes. And what that means is that when things ramp up, you don't really have a good sense of place for the town, and you don't really have a good sense of what other people's relationship is to all the history. I mean, you get tiny elements of that, which I really like, but I think that it's almost trying to serve two masters, the main thrust of the plot. And in my issue is it's less that the beginning or the end I felt was weaker. It's more that I think it takes a gradual dip. So the dip is never, I hate episode, whatever. But it's more a case of from the beginning to the end, I like the episodes less, and then I start liking the episodes more.
I can. Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, I'm just gonna say I think it ends up sticking parts of the landing, but because of that dip, it does have an effect on sort of the final stakes in the show. Yeah.
Vicky, what were you going to chime in with?
Well, I think Leon is just he's verbalized really well, I think, most of my thoughts in the show. I think what I was missing was that element of building up the town and really, I think, doing service to the mortal characters, because I actually just did not care about them enough. I thought the more compelling characters were all magical. And I don't know, I think it handles some things well with the mortal characters, but I really did not like the characterization of her friend as like this kind of magical Negro character almost with this cunning. And I think that's going back into something that is actually really dangerous for especially for a horror film, or a horror series rather. And the town itself is such a great setting. And I do love this whole sense of the suburban Gothic that both Riverdale and I think Sabrina were trying to go for, the sense of like the American small town stuck in the past kind of, but almost in a timeless sense. I think that is something that is uniquely American. And I wish they would have leaned into that a little bit more, because Riverdale actually does quite a good job of leaning into that kind of Gothic element about the suburbs.
Yeah.
But I think Sabrina probably could have, all the spooky things seem to be coming from the supernatural elements of it. And when there's so much that's kind of rooted into American geography and the whole concept of an American small town, and especially a mining town that is so Gothic, that it really would have lent, I think, something just a little bit like something to root it. Like, yeah, sorry. Go on.
Go, Leon.
I was just going to say, I think part of that comes from how naked both shows wear their influences on their sleeves. So with Riverdale, you have that Gothic Americana, but then it's a heavy dosing of like Lynch, who obviously is from that sort of that school as well, but has a particular aesthetic and like style choices. So they sort of dip into that well when they want to do the whole behind this picket fence is evil and like adultery and blah 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 blah. Whereas Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, that element is fully focused on all of their favorite horror movies, because like frame to frame, scene to scene are references to like at least 10 per shot of of different horror movies, and it and because they lean so heavy on those influences instead of sort of taking and sort of making something new with it, because a lot of it is like, that looks cool, let's put this in there. I think that's why you end up missing out on that extra layer, that next layer of depth.
Yeah. I feel like Sabrina was probably designed to be a celebration of your favorite horror movies. I think that's how they built this thing to function that way, and to be kind of like a celebration of that the horror genre, and to be presented in that way for Halloween, for something that you can watch. I think it was purely designed and built with that in mind when they put it together. And there's certain episodes that feel like homages to certain horror movies and things like that, which we can get into later. Particularly one episode that sticks in my mind. But
before we move on to spoilers or anything,
I wasn't going to go into spoilers yet.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to say I've got a few more thoughts that I just want to run through quickly.
Yeah.
So, going back to the intro briefly, I was super disappointed that it does the whole from the characters from Archie Comics and doesn't give any shout out to George Goddard or Dan DiCarlo. And I know, obviously, Aguirre Sacas's name is all over the thing because he's the producer on the TV show now. But there's no Robert Hack's art is all over that intro, and he's just no shout out at all.
No name for that, Matt. Yeah, that's kind of bad.
It's
really bad.
That I found that annoying, because I think like when people like DC are doing better than that, and Marvel, who are sort of in their history have been pretty bad at doing stuff, not giving people their due. When they are the names of the people who created the thing are there. Like, come on, a TV show, show run by someone who is a writer in the comics. I was hoping that whatever reason that happened, whoever upstairs or blah blah, I hope they rectify that, because I just don't like something to be like so indebted to its source material and then just say like, this just happened. This just happened. We got these things from these funny books, but we've changed it into something else. It's like, there's so much there. And so like, I was confused by that, but, on the cast, I really like the cast. I was, pleasantly surprised with all the Brits in there who are actual Brits. I like that the teen cast, are mostly people like closer to that age, like how they cast, Tom Holland in, Spider-Man Homecoming. Yeah. So, sorry?
Sorry, carry on. I don't know if you were finished yet.
Okay. And yeah, I like that. And I think even though we don't spend enough time with them, I do like the casting of her friends. Though some characters I enjoy more than others, which I'll go into. But I really like what they sort of gesture at with some of the characters, and there's a lot of cool avenues in like areas of like fun intersectionality they have that mirror sort of the supernatural part of the plot, and I really like that. But I just think they just weren't given enough time. I think standouts for me, I really like Lucy Davis as Hilda. I thought she was, I thought she started off slow, but then they gave her more to do, and she was ended up being one of the more highlights. I thought Michelle Gomez was really, really good, and what could have been easily like a one-note role as I don't know if it's a spoiler to say the name of her, but basically the teacher character. Like she's so good, just chewing scenery, and then I think Richard Coyle as like Blackwood, he's eating scenery.
Oh my god, yeah.
And like there's just ways that he like pronounces certain words that I just love it. He's hamming up so well. I really enjoyed that.
There's only one man that could have done that better than him, and that's Tim Curry.
That's taken there's not enough scenery to chew. I thought Tata Gabrielle's Prudence, I think I've got issues with her characterization that I'll be talking about in spoilers, but I thought that the way she played, I thought she brought more to the character than was on the page as Prudence.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think like just everything about her, the way she's just her attitude, and she brings I think she moderates it from just being like a mean girl to something else. So I quite like that. And then my favourite character, Chance Perdomo's Ambrose, just every time he's on screen delivering some exposition or whatever, I love it. I don't care. He's just the best.
Ambrose is great. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about him swanning around in his dressing gown later, but yeah, he's brilliant. But yeah, I mean, like cycling back to an earlier point that you guys were making about this out of time town. I feel like they were doing the whole 60s aesthetic on purpose as a way of kind of drilling down on the satanic panic thing, which is kind of what this is supposed to be like referencing and parodying and everything else. Because it feels very much like they're doing the whole, that's the aesthetic they're going for, like this kind of like satanic panic kind of like air over everything, kind of like how remember a time when people used to say that playing Black Sabbath records backwards would put you in touch with the devil and all that kind of stuff, and you know that's kind of like what I felt like they were going for, and kind of why I liked what they were doing, and also what I liked what they were doing with like nods to horror movies and stuff like that, because I kind of felt like everything was through that lens, and they were doing it on purpose as a way of pointing that out and sort of like parodying that almost, I guess. I don't know.
Kind of. I like, yeah. Because to top off that point, I think it's almost the opposite. I feel like it's from the Church of Knight's perspective. There's a lot of like Catholic panic going on.
Yeah, really definitely.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah, they're flipping it and they're doing it on purpose to try and So, but yeah, that's the whole thing I was trying to get at, actually, that they're doing it on purpose, like with this 1960s aesthetic, but flipping everything on its head. But there's some things about the way that the Church of the Night goes about things that I'll get onto when we do spoilers, because there's some things in there that I wanted to point out. But so yeah, I guess we can move on to spoilers now.
Well, just
can we? Before we do that, come on, Leon.
I guess we can't.
I haven't really had a chance to talk about the production yet, and I think I really like Adam Taylor's score. He worked on Handmaid's Tale, the TV series, which I really love. The production design is amazing throughout the show. Like, it's just so layered and so dense and so real that, like, I was thinking to myself, like, someone satanic must have worked on this show, and we're not far off, because apparently Lisa Soper, I believe, she was the production designer, and she's pagan. So, like, I think she's had a really good eye, and I think narrowed the gap between like what would look sort of appropriate for what's trying to, instead of it just being a grab bag of like Halloween store stuff. I think she's spent a lot of time nailing a lot of things. So like just incantation runes and stuff are carved into wood and buildings. Just stuff like the controversial statue that they're being sued over of Baphomet. That just like the layout of whether you're talking about the school, the witch school, or even the Spellman home. I think there's just so much laid in there that was just calling on like classic cinema of horror, but also actual stuff of the occult and such. So I think that is really good. And I mean, the thing I really want to settle on is that what did you guys think of the sort of camera techniques? Because you've got that controversial blur, which everyone's been going on about.
I quite like that. I thought that was kind of like, because when the magic stuff's happening, it's kind of trippy. It's supposed to take you out of like what's going. Like I like the idea of it that when magic is happening, it takes you out of this kind of like takes you out of the world for a second and kind of puts you in this. It gives you tunnel vision almost. Like you can't focus on anything else, and I quite like that. Like it plays with your head as the magic in the show probably would, and I quite like how they do that. Plays with your perception when it happens, which I expect would happen if you were almost tearing at reality with spells and things. So I quite like it.
Yeah, I grew to like it. I think it started off as kind of distracting, but then in unison with the like I was saying, the production design and just the overall world building aesthetically that they built up, I think it did help to like amplify that sense of unreality and like pulling away from like the natural world and there being something fuzzy happening on the edges, because it's literally fuzzing the edges of what you see. I came to like that. I wanted to add one thing onto what Leon said. You were talking about like, you know, bringing in artistic creatives. A lot of the artwork was actually from Clive Barker. So you've got a lot of paintings around the edges. And I felt like that added a really good touch, because that's one of the things I noticed from the get-go, was just how good the artwork like strewn all over the walls was.
And there's some
I was gonna say, I think he donated, I read, 150 or 200 pieces of art.
A lot. He basically invited them to his house and said, just riffle through and take what you want. Basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So can I move on to spoilers now, Leon?
If you really want to.
Are you done? Have you got anything else in the barrel?
Are you done, Leon?
I'll end with a final point then.
Yeah.
Talking about the cinematography, I quite like the blur. I think at the beginning, like Rahul saying, sometimes it didn't quite work. Like there's a panning shot where it doesn't work because it's like having an Instagram filter on, because the blur starts moving, so that bits, like it didn't really fit the shot. But for the rest of it, like whenever they do the stuff with like the weird sisters appearing in the forest, stuff like that, and you have that like that cool spooky sort of backward string that plays, and then they do a thing where I don't know if they're using prisms or whichever lenses as well as post stuff, but it works so well in those sequences. It really puts you on edge, and I love that. But
we had a moment of gushing where I was talking about like the blocking when the weird sisters come in, and like how the three of them enter shot like one after the other in quick succession, and like how it fills the frame with that, and then also the blur, and it's like moments like that where there's some synergy between the camera work and the lens that they, or whatever, you know, filter they've put on. That really worked.
Yeah, and I think that coupled with the wider aspect ratio than normal, it does give it a very different look, and you sort of feel that because it's the same, one of the same directors who did the pilot, or one of the same directors, from Riverdale, who did the pilot of Sabrina, and I think they with like the cinematographers, like I think it's David Lassenberg did the pilot. I think they just really wanted to make it be a different animal to Riverdale, considering it's all the same showrunners. And I think that using that, I think it's a 2.2 to 1 aspect ratio. I think they do manage to make that difference, because it's a bit of a cliche where that it looks more cinematic when you have a wider aspect ratio. But I do think it does actually work.
Yeah, for sure.
And it made it fit really well onto my phone screen.
Okay. So, is it spoiler time now?
It is.
Okay, so from this point forward, this is when we're going to get into spoilers. So, this is where you would pause the show, finish watching Sabrina, and then come back to us when you're done watching, and you can enjoy the rest of our conversation. So, spoilers start now. So, I'm going to go back onto what you were saying about Clive Barker, Ray. Because there's one episode, and back to what I was saying about this one episode in particular that I wanted to bring up as an homage to horror movies, which kind of felt like Nightmare on Elm Street smashed into Hellraiser, and it was great.
I think you're talking about the episode that got me back on the horse.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that episode right there, like down to the puzzle, and it was just such a feast of references and everything else. That one was for me. Like that's probably my favourite episode, actually.
So we're talking about episode 5, which I
yes.
can't remember the title of, but it's the one where she unleashes the nightmare demon.
Yes.
From the
puzzle
Baddie
box.
Bad.
Baddie Bad. From what was the box called?
It's an arcane puzzle, and I can't remember what the proper name is.
It's called a configuration, though, which is straight out of Barker.
Archer on configuration, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's such a great nod. Yeah, that was my favourite episode, hands down, as well.
Episode is called Dreams in a Witch House, by the way.
Yes.
And even
fabulous. Even Batty Bat, like, behaves like Freddy Krueger. Like,
yeah, she does. Yeah.
Yeah, like the way Batty Bat presents herself on screen and behaves, like the acting, it's like she's here, watch Nightmare on Elm Street, now be that. You know, it's great. And that was kind of like one of my favourite nods. Have any of you guys got any other sort of things that you picked out that kind of like your sort of like favourite nods or like big sort of like points to horror movies and things like that, like classic stuff that you've enjoyed? Before I open this up, I'm going to note the other thing I liked. I liked the whole horror host thing that they were doing with the owner of the comic book store and with Hilda as well. I thought that was great. Like the classic horror host and how they explained that you don't get classic horror hosts anymore, which is kind of a shame because, you know, but yeah, it was cool how they did that. I quite like that. And the comic book store as well. If I ever own a comic book store, that's the store I want. So, we'll start with you, Vicky. Like anything else that you picked up that you really enjoyed as references to horror movies or anything?
I like that they're kind of dotted throughout, almost like little Easter eggs, like in the film, then you open it. Like I love things, you know, like the introduction of Daniel Webster and things that really, you know, they're quite indiscriminate about harking back to like all like a wide range of kind of horror films that I think you're going to pick up something if you've seen any of these. So I like that, you know, it's not just, it's not too niched.
Yeah.
It's very, very much something that's quite easily accessible, even for people that haven't watched a lot of horror films. I think it's, you know, it's as much or as little as you want to dip into. And I think that there's something quite magical about that, where, you know, like the more horror films you've seen, the more you pick up on and the more you're just like, it's exciting, you know, they've got this configuration thing, which is straight out of Hellraiser, and love that. I thought that was done really, really well.
I did, yeah. The minute I came on the screen.
Yeah, I really like that, like you're saying, it's peppered throughout the entire show, and that makes it feel more like it's a fabric of their world. Like,
exactly.
It's not a hint to the audience, like, hey, look at us, we know so much about horror movies. It's more like, these are genuine references that have some, like, arcane or, like, really old referencing from something even more ancient, that whatever modern version we have is actually an interpretation of that, and that's in the fabric of the world itself. Like, there were some other ones, like, yeah, for example, when they're doing the exorcism, and obviously there's like over exorcist references or whatever in the framing and the light coming from the windows, but like when, you know, when they're shouting the names of past witches to give them strength, and they throw out things like Anne Boleyn, and it was like this really cool little things which they ground so many fictional and non-fictional different references.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was so awesome. I loved that.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes. It's so great in terms of world building, I think, to just have that element that people can recognize. You know, it's not just this fictional world where you don't have any rooting in like our reality. It's just this kind of shared reality that is somehow elevated into the supernatural, which I really appreciate.
I enjoyed that. That was cool. The satanic exorcism, which was that was a really good episode. Like they this whole like conversation in the like, oh, you know, we can't do exorcisms. We're supposed to be friends with demons, you know. That kind of is like I quite enjoyed that. Like this whole like question about can witches perform exorcisms, which was cool.
Yeah,
and that brings me on to my point actually about how the Church of the Night is basically the complete antithesis of the Catholic Church in this show. And it's like, I'm going to use the term lawful evil. So, like, the D&D term lawful evil, because it described the way that the Satanic Church is in this, like the way that the Church of the Night is. It's like they have all these laws that are the exact opposite of the laws in the Catholic Church, for example, and they abide by these laws, but also some of the laws actually are the same and some of it crosses over. Like you can, and the way they do like confession and everything else, and it's like, it's just such a like holding a mirror up to it kind of thing. And the way they do that and the way they use that to comment on the Catholic Church, is really cool.
I think there's a really weird hypocrisy to the Church of the Night, because like beyond the obvious hypocrisy that they're trying to bring up by like mirroring it to the Catholic Church, and the obvious like hatred that they have for each other because they're like opposing forces, I think it's really weird that the Church of Night, like, it's basically a really petty, like, I don't want to be the Catholic Church, where everything is what the Catholic Church does, but flipped on its head. They literally, like, I mean, obviously this is all rooted in the symbology from years back, but, like, they flip the cross upside down, or they, you know, like, everything is literally just the word that the Catholics use, and then with, like, 3 letters added onto the front of it. I just think that's really strange. Like, it feels really petulant to me. And that's one of the things that made me, like, I flip-flopped on with the show, whether it was, you know, doing it po-faced or whether it was trying to get us to see, like, just how, in some ways, childish it all is. And then because it's so childish, it then suddenly flips the script by making it really, really heavy and dense, and, like, actually these dark forces are genuinely here, and you have this giant, like, goat demon staring at you in the face, demanding your blood, and, like, it can flip-flop between those two vibes really well. And I think that's something that I grew into as the show went on.
I think it's a bit of both. I think that's where a lot of the comedy comes into it for me as well. In the way they do stuff. Like, it's because there's parts where the show feels like you're watching in the way, like, that there's this whole, like, these dramas within the church and within the way they worship and stuff. It's almost like they've taken a Sunday evening show from British television about, like, a small village and their church and all the dramas and the going-ons or whatever, and then turned it into sort of like flipped it on its head and made it about the Church of Night instead. If you get where I'm coming from with that. Like,
like you could take any story from the Catholic Church and then just turn it upside
down. Yeah, but like the way like, some kind of, like, really, like, harmless show from Sunday night TV or whatever about, like, oh, you know, this is about the congregation and about, like, little dramas within the congregation. Oh, we've got to be ready in time for such and such festival or whatever that we're hosting at the church, like the Harvest Festival or something like that. And then they completely flip it on its head. And it's one episode in particular, actually, where they're celebrating the, they do the cannibal thing, and I can't remember what the name of it is, what they call it. Where it's supposed to be giving thanks to the witch that gave her life so the witches could live on.
The Feast of Feasts.
That's it, yeah. Like that in particular, and the way Zelda cares so much about how, like, her standing within the church as well, like, and things like that. It just feels that way to me. Like they've just, and that's like a lot of the comedy in it for me is that as well, and watching the way the Church of the Night is trying to not be the Catholic Church, but at the same time being the same as the Catholic Church. I don't know if I'm supposed to find that funny, but I do. Leon, you got any thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, I think all that stuff here, as you're saying, is quite deliberate, and I think that mileage may vary on how effective it was deployed, and I thought it was quite effective, because part of me was like, yes, that's a bit like on the nose, but then I think one of my favourite bits of exposition, or it's not really exposition, it kind of is, but it's 2 characters just talking about shit, is at the beginning of episode 2, I think, where Blackwood is talking to Sabrina about her, like, fears of the dark baptism.
Yeah.
And she's basically said, even though, like, part of it doesn't make sense to me because she's, like, been a half-witch her whole life and can clearly do spells and shit, blah, blah, but then she has the most basic, the world started a second before the first scene was shot, of like, what about blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm sure her parents, aunts would have said stuff, but whatever. Like, she has all these questions and then he fires back, slander, or that's a lie, or da-da-da-da, and it's like, it's not evil, it's free will, and I thought that stuff was, like, very effective because it shows you one of the central sort of push and pulls that we kind of have with the show is that, one, it's a show where they want you to kind of like everyone who's not an outright villain, even if you like them in she's an annoying parent or that type way. But at the same time, because they double down on, like, this isn't Harry Potter, this isn't we're just messing around with witches, this isn't like a lot of this sort of TV fiction to do with this stuff. It's usually very like in Buffy, there's hellmouths and a possible heaven dimension thing, but they never really lent into the sort of dichotomy of like heaven, hell, and Judeo-Christeo religion stuff. But this goes fully hardcore into it, where characters are saying "Hail Satan" and stuff like that, and characters saying "Praise Satan," and like that's the sort of funny sort of flip on its head type thing. But like good characters are doing that as well, because I mean, for us, even though Zelda's kind of like hardcore and harsh, she's still a spellman, and all spellmans are generally quite nice.
Yeah.
So I think you have that sort of thing where the show keeps pushing in and pulling back with that stuff. So at times it is like funny, and other times it's just like, yeah, but I don't know. Like I don't fully believe the world sometimes because of stuff like that. And I think it's something where, because they want you, like, if any other show, say Sabrina is a human, and then suddenly she's interacted with these Satanists, just decades and decades of media and living in Western countries where that is just outright bad, the satanic panic, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're immediately all bad. But in this sort of having it where it's like, oh no, you have good Satanists as well. That's cool, but I think they don't fully like set up, or more, they don't confidently, push up that from sort of a grand sense, but what they are effective at is showing, how different characters would sort of be lulled into that world, in the same way that like cults and certain religions get perfectly nice people who bake you a cake and look after you, be really nice to you, get you presents at whichever holiday or whatever, but then their religion is like against like homosexuality or something like that. So I think they're very effective in that, but there are some weaknesses in that approach, because they want you to sort of like basically basic constructions of like characters in TV shows who are meant to like and not like, kind of hinders them a little bit in that way. So it's kind of push and pull.
Yeah, I can get behind what you're saying there. I mean, like, did any of us actually expect it to be so dark when we were? Yeah, did any of us expect it to go as far as it did and to do what it did? And
well, like I know I've just been talking loads, but I'll quickly say, like, when I watched the first episode, and I'll give some background to this. I grew up in a really, 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 really religious Christian household, like to the level where a lot of not a lot of secular movies were on the TV without us sort of getting them on there, apart from Family Fare and, oddly enough, stuff like Disney. But like sometimes it was annoying to watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the 1996 show, without getting comments from my parents saying, oh, it's about witchcraft, blah, blah, like, this is what we're dealing with. So don't ask me how I watched all of Buffy in the same room as them, but I did it somehow. But, so like, we kind of got that. So I remember after watching episode 1, talking to my brother and saying like, I mean, the thing is, my parents kind of mellowed in some ways, but like, I think it mellowed in the way that Sabrina the Teenage Witch there'd be less complaining about it. But I was saying that I don't know how you guys are going to watch this on the family TV because this is a show where they don't just gesture at it in that, oh, I got magic, I'm Doctor Strange or something like that. It's like they are outright saying that shit. They're like, Lucifer this, Satan this, the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord is the PG-13. But like,
yeah,
I thought they were just going to do that. Like, and I think if the show was on the CW, he just would have been referred to as the Dark Lord. But no, this is like Lucifer. They just go straight into
Hail
it.
Satan, straight up. Yeah,
dark baptism and all these things. And it's like, I was thinking like, I don't know how you guys are going to do it. And I still don't know how they're going to do it.
All the iconography and imagery as well, like the sort of like sacred geometry, the big massive Baphomet statue in the main hall of the school.
And part of it feels like I was not expecting that. And I kind of like how they just dive deep into that. Because it does feel like, at first it feels like, oh, like, less like shock tactics, but more like we can do what we like. Well, Netflix type thing.
Yeah.
But also, I think, it makes the world a bit more interesting because I don't think you've had a show like this with characters sort of in this milieu, which is like a teen show, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah.
But it be outright explicit with some of the things like this, and I was knocked back by it.
Vicky, you got any thoughts on that?
I'm actually I'm chewing over what you said ages show being kind of, rooted in satanic panic and back to that. But my problem with that is that satanic panic is rarely actually about Satanism. It's always about displaced anxieties about other issues. And so my question becomes, I don't actually know what anxieties the show is gesturing at. And I think it's interesting having a 16-year-old girl at the center of it all. And a 16-year-old girl who's precisely half witch and half mortal. And so I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but darkness of the show and leaning into the whole satanic aspect of it. I'm glad they went there. I think more shows should, and I think more shows, it kind of takes no prisoners in the assumption that just because it is about a 16-year-old girl, there are things it can't show. Because there are so many things that are horrific about being 16 in itself and caught in that liminal state that are so rooted in the uncanny and macabre and the gothic that it kind of, I think having the juxtaposition of sweet, innocent Sabrina, who also embraces the darkness and all the horror images is actually really interesting, in terms of just not, I guess, just assuming that the audience can handle all that.
Yeah.
Assuming that 13-year-olds will kind of lean into the darkness, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
I saw it as two things. I saw the satanic aspect. I thought the thing that Leon brought up where Blackwood is saying, he says that line where it's about free will. It was never about, it was never about this. It was about free will. And I feel like a lot of the show is about deconstructing that, about showing the hypocrisy in that statement about how you're supposed to be gaining free will or you're supposed to be gaining power, but at such a cost that they try and hide. And they feel sheltered behind this facade of the power that they get from it is worth the cost. But then there's also the aspect about being young, being Sabrina, being 15 or 16 years old, and kind of barreling down the hallway of injustice, with fury and naivety, and misearned but really vital confidence. I feel like that very woke aspect of the show is kind of partly their thesis as well. But then I don't know if they fully hit the mark with that. But generally, I like that thing was going on, and I feel like I don't know if those two things meshed very well together. But I don't know if any of you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that comes back to something I mentioned earlier, where I think that the show's gesturing a lot of stuff, but I don't think it digs in deep in some things. And I think there can be I love things that do leave things a bit more open. But generally in a text that is meant to be, here is the general thing. and then take this and do what you like with it. Generally, there is still some authorship there, which leads to that. Whereas this, it's more a case of, in some ways, set dressing, where it's like, okay, we'll fill in the gaps by adding this, or talking about 13 witches who died, blah, blah, and we'll shortcut you. So instead of actually delving in what makes the influences so good, it's more a case of, we're just going to get to the point by showing you, shortcutting to show you this thing so you can feel a particular way. And I think one of the places that you feel that a lot is how it deals with, say, like Sabrina, and bringing up the themes of, say, like I said, the liminal state, and that whole sort of Sweet 16 and becoming an adult thing, and different choices, and intersectional feminism with things like Wicca at school, and like all the power that you get when you become a witch, blah blah. And I think they show like a good, not really a good understanding, but like they gesture towards a very interesting mirror, and multiple mirrors really, of like the whole the loss of autonomy and free will, and particularly with like women, and how like despite all the talk of being opposite from, as you guys hit at before, of like the false god or whatever, they still have this super patriarchal society. They still like every person and all like the women have to sign their life away, need to have kids, and you better hope that it's a male kid because we don't know what's going to happen if you have a girl first. Like all these like things that and the characters do speak it in the show, and that's why I think that like Madame Satan has lines like that, like Prudence has lines like well, he's a man, isn't he? Like stuff like that. That they do. Yeah, they gesture at that, and like all the interesting characters on the show are women characters pushing back against some type of thing, and I think they are heading towards a certain thing, and they're bringing up these things, and they're not just tossed in there. Like one of the things that I think is super interesting is how Susie, who's played by the non-binary actor Lachlan Watson, is one, you don't usually get that anyway, a non-binary or queer or trans person actually played by someone who is that. So that already is a step in that direction, because then that person's lived experience, and from what I've read of interviews, Lachlan says that they brought a lot of their own history and their own upbringing into the story for Susie. And I think that is super interesting, and does build that character when that character doesn't have really much screen time or even have their weird power explained. But I think on the flip side of that, and this is why the Susie character is a good example of basically the main failings and sort of pluses of the show, is that they spend so little time with Susie that we just have a couple of gestures. So you have where Susie, who is pronounced in the show as being feminine, she's being bullied by those like douchebag renter jocks. So you have that. I guess you have the reference to the Virginia Woolf Orlando book that she tries to steal out. But and then you have sort of that weird thing with that I didn't really know how to read until I read some interviews, where Roz's aunt, who's blind and has the cunning, she keeps referring to her as a young man and boy and stuff like that. And at the beginning, I was like, I didn't know if we were meant to read if if Susie's struggling with gender, which they kind of hint at, but at the same time, she's just kind of doing her shit, and she's punching these bullies back, even if she gets beaten the shit out of. So it's kind of like hit and miss, because they don't not really diving into that while bringing it while having it be a thing. So at the beginning, I thought, is she being like purposely like misgendered, and is that meant to be like with the truth side, I can see what you really are? I was thinking, oh god, like that is bad. But I think the character is actually meant to be undecided and not. I think the focus is meant to be non-binary, like the actor playing Susie. So I think that's what they were doing, but I just don't think they either didn't have enough time with the character and put it on screen and it hit the cutting room floor, or they just weren't effective in actually humanizing what Susie is about. So that quite annoyed me, because I thought that Susie was a cool character, and like when her powers sort of revealed, and just the way she like handles her shit. Like she isn't just. I was worried at the beginning that she'd just be some victim character, but the way she handles her shit, like I thought, like there's so much good there, and I'm hoping in season 2 they like spend some more time. But it's like frustrating, because you get so close, and then they don't really deal with it, and it's like usually this is a thing that I would paint towards like, well, they didn't have the right people in the room. But I think what it is either they've just truncated so much where a lot of themes are going to come into season 2, or there was a lot of push and pull, because in an interview, Lachlan Watson does say that they do have a trans writer on the show. MJ, they mentioned MJ, and in the writers' room list I saw an MJ Kaufman. So I'm doing disconnecting the dots. So that's awesome that is the case, because you do not get that often. But I think this is a thing where like showrunner vision versus like how much people can actually get their viewpoints onto the screen. So hopefully that stuff improves, because there's so much potential, and I just feel like it's kind of squandered.
So going back to like what we were saying there about when you mentioned some of the things that people have said in the show, like what the women have said and things like that, with regards to men and things, the one that really got me was the discussion of the apple, the malus malum, and the whole like that being the point where the two are supposed to split apart, and we're supposed to get the two sort of like mirror images of the same religion kind of thing, but it doesn't actually split apart, because they still look at it in the same way, and they still, in a sense, treat Eve the same way.
Well, because the line was something like, is the apple evil or is it knowledge? And
depends who you talk to.
It depends on if you ask a man or a woman.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of interesting things like that.
Ray, have you got any thoughts on any particular characters in the show or anything like that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think like we've ping-ponged around a lot of different points here, so I'm a little bit lost, if I'm honest. But like one of the things that you were talking about is like this, like it's still a patriarchal society, and they claim to be more progressive, but if anything, it's this reformed church that is only regressing because of the men in power, and I think that's an interesting theme. I think there's a lot. I've got a bunch of different notes on this, and I don't really know where to begin, if I'm honest. I think because I've been thinking about what Leon was saying about Susie, and I was like, part of me feels like maybe they knew exactly what they were doing. Like they were writing it into the character's being. Like this is what the character would experience with the life that she's living, and this is how people react to her, despite irregardless of all the supernatural things happening and whether there's a commentary to be made. Maybe it's enough to have that in there and not have to comment on it. I don't know. That's the way I saw it. I thought it was quite refreshing to have her be non-binary, but also not comment on it loads and just have it be part of the fabric of her nature.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I was hoping that I was clear enough in what I was saying. Because what I'm not saying is that, they've got a non-binary actor, they need to like have a massive big focus on this and blah blah. I think it's more a case of, I feel that they're tying some of the themes of that into the show, but they're not being effective with it. So, say you could mirror her experience as a non-binary character, Susie, with Sabrina's experience being having to bounce between both the mortal and the witch world, and that does seem like that's a very explicit like link between the two. But then I don't feel, I feel like there's loads of gestures, but I don't feel like they do it. They don't really pay off. It just feels like doing to do,
like deliberately underwritten. Things. Yeah. No, I see what you mean.
Do you have any thoughts on this stuff, Vicky?
I think I absolutely agree with Leon. I think the intention is there, and I think the intention is noble. I think, you know, the themes that the show addresses are very ambitious for a teen show.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, you know, the genre is kind of a limiting factor for what it can address. But I just wish it would have pushed a bit further, because it brings up a lot of good points. You know, going back to the Susie character, I think there are so many opportunities to really say things that other teen shows aren't saying. And even the ones on, you know, Netflix, because I have so many problems with shows like 13 Reasons Why and the depiction of like teen inner lives in shows like that I feel like Sabrina is almost a Trojan horse, or could have been a Trojan horse to address really important issues for teenagers, and yet just didn't really go there, which I feel like is a missed opportunity. And
I think it started off so strong with that as well.
It did. And I wish they would have, because, you know, the Gothic, and I think there's a reason why there are so many Gothic teen shows on television. You know, regardless of the quality of each show individually, there's a reason for that trend. And I think it's because, like, teenage years and the uncanny are intimately linked. I think there's just so much going on there, especially in terms of American society, you know, where, you know, there's this belief that Americans kind of struggle to really come to terms with an adult sexuality, which goes back to like Leslie Fiedler's Love and Death in the American Novel, that I think is so quintessential to like these developmental years, that they could have done so much with it, especially with the whole witchcraft angle, because witches are such a great vehicle for that, and they're such an empowering vehicle for women specifically, and women have been cast as this Eve character for so long that I feel like it touches on these things, but never has anything new to say about them, which is why I was disappointed.
Yeah. I think I agree with everything you guys have said. So, like, most of the points that I was going to bring up regarding characters, you guys have, like, took them out of my mouth, so to speak. So I come, like, looking at my page here, like, scrambling, running low on things to say that hasn't already been said. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I think, one thing that I have actually still got here, actually, that is still in the barrel, is the fact that the way they deal with toxic masculinity with Harvey's family. And the way, like, they have, I mean, like, it's something that's kind of been done before in stuff, in the way that they've dealt with Harvey not wanting to be part of the family business and his dad being, kind of really pushy with him and trying to get him to, like, telling him to man up and things like that, and trying to get him to grow into this other, like, you know, trying to get him to, you know, men do this and this is what you're supposed to do. You need to go and work in the mines and things like that. It's hard for me to kind of, I can't articulate what I wanted to say now, but yeah, it's getting, yeah, that kind of, that stuff regarding Harvey and the way Harvey's family works is kind of cool for me, like, seeing that and seeing the way they do, like, Harvey wants to be an artist, but he's being pushed in another direction because he's taught that art is something that's effeminate and something that he shouldn't be associated with as a man maybe, or something like that, and the way his father looks at that, and the way his father treats him, and the way his father kind of like forces him in that direction and things, I think is quite good. And the way they do that, the way they portray that family, the way they nobody cooks, they have TV dinners all the time. It's like microwave meals and things like that, and it's just
they really highlight the absence of like a mother or even just general like feminine figure.
Yeah, but the also the father is like really, really like hyper. I'm a man, I do man things, and this is how you're going to be, and you're going to do it whether you like it or not, like forcing his brother to carry on in the mines instead of going to college and things like that, which I think is quite
unreasonably stupid.
Yeah.
Also, he was savage. He was like, any other parent is like, I don't care if you've got footage of my son crushed. I don't believe he's dead until actually touch his body. And he was like, it's too much hassle to get him out. I've got to get the boys working again. We need to open this thing up. Tommy's dead. Bye, Tommy.
Let's get the insurance money now, King of the assholes. But I quite like the way they did Harvey's family for that, and I like the way that they kind of like highlighted this whole toxic masculinity thing through those guys, through those three men. I thought that was cool. The way they brought that up. Oh, sorry, carry on.
No. Oh, sorry. On you go, Rahul.
Vicki, you go.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting point bringing up this whole toxic masculinity angle to the show, because I actually think that this is another one of those things that the show brings up but doesn't really fully realize. And, there's my problem with Harvey's family is that they're so, the father figures, especially, it's such an archetypal image that it almost doesn't seem real. Like, I don't see him as a fully fledged character. I see him as a stand-in for a type of character.
Yeah.
And it's funny watching this show side by side with actually this season of American Horror Story, because I think that show also touches on toxic masculinity. And I know that that's not the focus of this episode, but it's interesting kind of watching them side by side, because I think that show actually does a much more effective job of touching on this issue of toxic masculinity. But anyway, probably fodder for another time.
Yeah, I've not watched American Horror Story. I've not actually watched any of it yet. Actually, I've not even started watching that. So
this season would be interesting to compare to Sabrina, I think, just because both of them concern covens, and the coven in American Horror Story is unapologetically matriarchal, and you don't really. I mean, I know that you as much as witches are considered female figures, I think that sense of like women actually belong at the top, and this is kind of, it's not even a question. Like, men just do not belong, and this is how society could be. It's a really interesting kind of vision of the future, or not the future, not our future at the moment, at the rate we're. But it's interesting to just. That's a show that I would say went there. As opposed to Sabrina, which tried, and I think tried well, but still fell a little bit short for me. Yeah.
Ray, what were you going to say? Because you had something to bring up as well, didn't you?
I was going to pull away a little from like the overall metaphor and what all these these things mean. I was going to ask about some plot machinations. So towards the end, it starts off with Sabrina trying really hard to be a hero. Like, she's a furious, energetic activist, like whether it's for mortal ideals or witch ideals. And then at the end of this show, she's trying really hard to do what she thinks is the right thing, but like she's almost she's the villain of the piece in a lot of ways, where she makes such wrong choices in trying to do the right thing, and how that escalates, and how it's still, I don't know, like she breaks apart a family through her actions. Like, how do you guys feel about that characterization of her?
She can't do right for doing wrong, and I think she feels like she's trying to do the right thing, but I kind of understand that, like, trying to fix something and then by trying to fix it, breaking it, and almost like I quite liked how they did that. Like, she was trying to be good, and she was trying to help people, but it almost, because it was coming from a selfish place, she was making it worse.
Because the thing that I really like about it is that it's about being young and about being naive, and about being arrogant, but also being really well-meaning. And
I can fix it.
Yeah, and mixing up all those elements in the wrong way, because, you know, there's something to be said for knowledge and experience. And I kind of liked that what I saw as a message towards the end. Like, you can have all of these ideals, but it has to come with some level of, I don't know, experience counts for a lot. And I think there was something that one of you had written into the document, which was about Americans' culture being so fascinated with teenagers, and specifically teenagers going through horrible things. But also, like, to me, I read that as Americans having such a reverence for youth and less reverence for, I don't know, for the elderly and for what counts as experience. So I don't know if I'll leave that open to you guys. I don't know if you have something to say on that, Vicky.
This is where I think the show actually really is Sabrina and how she fails. And I think that is a space that I think you see a lot more with male protagonists around her age. And I think what I really like about the show is that they didn't Mary Sue her. That she's not some kind of like perfect witch that you can, that's just really cool that girls can aspire to be. She is allowed to fail, and as well-meaning as her intentions were, I think, there's an aspect there that's just so quintessential to American culture and this kind of whole exaltation of youth, as you were saying, and that's usually, I think, tied to the figure of the American Adam, who is just this mythical, prelapsarian person that is, by, I guess, perfect in a sense, but also doesn't really have any experience. And I think experience is the defining feature here. Is it's almost like once she gains experience of all these adventures, she then falls tainted and, becomes Eve, signs away her name and all. It's interesting kind of seeing that with the female protagonist and seeing how that's reversed and seeing how all these tropes aside, like tied to the feminine, also play into Sabrina. I think she is, for all the show's, I guess, trials and errors, I think Sabrina is the strongest character, as well she should be, for a show that really hinges on Kieran and Shipka. And I think she does a really good job of playing this person who is just trying her best, but is caught in a really, really difficult position. And I think, that that's the part of the story that I really buy, is her trying and failing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes she can be a really challenging character to like just outwardly like, but I really enjoy that characterization. I really like it.
And this is what the comics do well, actually. The books that this is based on, they have that whole thing with the necromancy and bringing somebody back comes with a price, is actually almost ripped entirely from the books, but without it having a resolution like it does in the show. So they've taken the whole necromancy angle and the whole thing where she brings somebody back to life, but it goes wrong and there's a price to pay, but it's not actually resolved so far in the comics, I'll say, because we've only because they when they're going to finish it, I don't know. But
the show was your resolution.
Yeah, the show was my resolution. Yeah.
Because like backing up or more co-signing what Vicky said, like I skipped over earlier when talking about the characters, but because I think Kernan Shipka, I think that she was one of the reasons why I was hyped for the show, because I'm a big Mad Men fan, and she's a child actor in that, so she grows with the show, and like especially in the later seasons, she's so good for what they ask of her in the show. So when I heard that she was cast as Sabrina, I was just like, oh wow, that's kind of perfect. And then watching the show, I had this thing where like I thought that she was great during certain sequences and not so great during other sequences. And that was usually a case where if she was ever pushing back against something, I thought she was so strong. And that leads all the way to the end where I think she just like, she fully grows in and inhabits that character. But then in other episodes, sometimes I think like the tone was misjudged, and that's usually, like, stuff to do with mortals and a lot of stuff to do with like Harvey. Like I never really bought, not going to say I didn't buy the relationship, but I never really bought that she was in the same show or in the same scenes as some of the of some of those sequences when they're just talking about stuff. It never felt like, for a while, I didn't feel like she was in that scene in the same way that the tone depicted. But then in every time, saying that it was to do with more dark stuff or hard decisions, she just really nailed it. And then I think they managed to sort of dovetail those together as the show went on. And she was just going from strength to strength.
Yeah. So all I can do at this point is just pretty much echo what everyone else is already saying. I don't really have anything to add to the conversation as far as all this stuff goes. I think if we move on to conclusions then, unless anybody else has got anything left they want to add.
I do.
Yep, go ahead.
So I really like this show, and I really like the stuff that it touches on, even if it doesn't always stick the landing, or if a lot of this stuff has been introduced in season 1 to be handled more in depth in season 2. There are some elements with Susie where I don't think they work, and as Vicki mentioned earlier, with the Ross character, Ross's grandma, you do. I think you see sort of some of the seams of the show, or the limits of what gesturing towards stuff without a deeper understanding of some stuff, or at least an understanding of optics. Because I think what the show does well, and what Riverdale does well, is that casting-wise, it's quite colourblind. And there's lots of stuff where in the past you just have loads of stupid, annoying questions, and now people just accept it. Like Ambrose, he's a Spellman, he's a cousin. We don't need to be like, oh, how come he's not white? Blah blah. So you just accept it because you blah blah. You just connect the dots in your head. And I think there's a lot of interesting characters of all different, all three of the weird sisters are different ethnicities, and that's all cool. But I think where that can sort of backfire happens when you sort of forget sort of imagery. So the whole thing, with Ross, for instance, it does have this thing of the magical Negro trope, how especially to solve things in the show, and it's I've got this spiritual power, I don't know where it came from, it wasn't given by the witches, but it kicked in when we got blind, type thing. And it's as a general supernatural law power thing, it is a cool concept, but it's sort of ignoring sort of the history and the visuals of that can end up putting a sour sort of taste in your mouth. And the thing is, with that thing, it was more a case of it's a bit weird, but I don't know what they're doing with it, and it's I don't know, possibly innocuous or whatever. But then I feel more liberties are taken with the Prudence character. In episode 4, I believe it is, with the harrowing, which is the sort of hazing you have going to witch school. And I remember watching it, so at the end of that episode, they've been hazing Sabrina and they take her out, but Sabrina's made the deal with the ghost children. And so instead of her being, hung like a witch, the three, ghost sisters, the weird sisters are, lifted up, and hung, with invisible, ropes and stuff, and mirroring sort of the deaths of many witches, blah, 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 blah. But one of those visuals is a black woman with a noose, an invisible noose, but with a noose around her head, choking for dear life. And it's that's one of the things where a black writer or black director just would have, just tweaked that a bit, because it's not meant, obviously the scene is not meant to be anything about lynching or whatever. It's about like the hanging of witches, and that's the point of the sequence.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's invoking that imagery in an uncomfortable way. Yeah. So like, it wasn't something that made me think, ugh, and I switched off the episode, but it's one of those things that it just stacked with other weird stuff, where it didn't feel like there was a full, not even understanding, but a full sort of like awareness of, how some of these tropes work. And that's where I think like, that's where like colorblind characters or colorblind show can sort of backfire if you, aren't aware of certain things that can just look bad. And I thought, and then so like having that as it is, that's bad imagery. But then she's continually sort of mistreated as a character because, as I said, Tati Gabrielle brings a lot more to the role that's on the paper because like she could easily be like a subpar sort of Regina George Mean Girls type character, but they do give her a lot more to do, and she sort of excels in that. And I think the best sort of written episode for her is the Feast of Feasts, where her and Sabrina are going back and forth about why do you want to be eaten and blah blah, you're going to be killed. Like, and I think that's so cool having those characters just discuss all that stuff, and it really builds that character because you start to see sort of the cracks in her faith, and sort of like her sort of fears of like maybe this isn't right or whatever. And then it's revealed obviously that it was a setup and that she was going to be killed. And it's like, okay, that's cool, blah blah. But it's like, oh, so she's like, now she's the bastard daughter of like Blackwood's. It's like, okay. And it's like, and then the person who's trying to kill her is Blackwood's white. It's like, okay. And then you kind of have just weird stuff like with the babies at the end, and it's like, oh, we're going to save this baby's life, and we're going to take it, and I'll bring up this baby, and it's like, okay, this is all getting, this is like, it's the stacking stuff like that where, and I'm not saying that there's a cruel intent, and I don't know, people might be listening, oh, it's so sensitive, that's SJW, blah blah. But it's like, I'm not saying really that that's particularly bad in terms of like, don't do that in the story. I'm just saying that it exposes a lack of awareness for some of these things, and what it does is just, I don't know, like having everyone sort of be a blank slate in that sort of way where, look, it just feels like a lot of this stuff comes from like history, and one of the downsides of that out of time sort of Riverdale / Sabrina thing is that they don't really deal with history in a realistic sense beyond like talking about something. So I think in Riverdale they mention like an underground railroad or something like that, and there's just bits and pieces here, and like, but I don't know, it's like, you could excuse that off as being like high fantasy, like that doesn't happen, blah blah, but then they're still in America, and they're still in, like, I think it just doesn't, I don't know, I think you just, when you're trying to pick and choose in that way, because it's sort of utopian, but what it does is sort of just erases instead. So, I think it's a tricky balance, because I'm not saying, the black character, you gotta address black, and you gotta have a racism episode, and that's not what I'm saying, that'd be stupid. But it's one of those things where not having this person be black, but not be black in terms of the story, you just run up into weird stuff like that. And I'm hoping that, I don't know, like, these are sort of just like missteps in trying to tell this interesting story, and not more a roadmap where we're going to keep bumping into stuff like this.
This is that issue, like episode 1 problem that we always have, where it's like, why should it have to be up to the next few books to resolve the questions that we have from the very start? So like, it shouldn't have to be heavy lifting done in season 2, I think. And like, I totally get what you mean about these things, like stacking, like it's all these minor oversights, or like these small-ish slivers of oversights that compound together and can actually congeal into like a serious thing, because the audience is still living in 2018, that you can't hide from these issues a lot of the time. And yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. So we can start to close this up now. We can move into conclusions. I agree with everything you've said there regarding those characters as well and everything else, and the fact that maybe the show does mishandle certain things. And I echo what Leon's saying there about hopefully in season 2 they can rectify some of that, because season 2 has already been shot, I think, hasn't it?
I thought that was the case, that they were shot back to back, but I think they were written back to back, and that season 2 is currently being shot now.
Okay, well that's cool. At least we know we're getting season 2. So, moving on to overall conclusions for the show then. Overall I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I didn't have any real misgivings with it. I mean, a lot of you, I know you guys have said that it's sort of like it started better and then it's ended weak, or the other way around, flip wise. But I didn't really have a problem with the pacing of it or anything else. I was really into it start to finish, and for me it was kind of like a perfect thing to watch over Halloween, a perfect sort of celebration of everything that I enjoy about Halloween. And that was kind of what drew me to it and what kept me in it. I mean, just I guess move to Vicki. What were your sort of like overall conclusions of the show?
Now having picked the show apart a little bit, I do have to say that I really did enjoy it, and I am looking.
Yeah,
and I think it just has so much potential, and I think anything that is as ambitious as Sabrina is bound to have some problems. And I think my thoughts are really along the same lines as Leon's, that, I think it falls down a little bit where it gets too ambitious. And I think that's something that can definitely be rectified, at least to some extent, in season 2, because it is so strong in the fact that it has gone for a lot of representation on screen. But I think when you introduce characters of color and non-binary characters, I think that comes with a certain amount of responsibility. And I think telling a story of witchcraft, which has really, really like such a upsetting history in the US, that also comes with a certain amount of responsibility. And I think these two things are, we've been talking a little bit about intersectionality, not on a deep level, but I think these two things are related. I think the history of women in witchcraft is one history, and I think the history of racial tension in the US is maybe a little bit caught up in this, more so than the series implies at the moment. But I'm looking forward to seeing season 2 and seeing if they kind of go to these places that are really actually very hard to talk about in terms of how these issues have been portrayed in American history and how they've been kind of downplayed in American popular culture.
Yeah, it would be nice to see them address those things. Ray?
Yeah, overall I really liked it. I'm in for season 2. I want to see more of like how Sabrina develops after having gone through these, like how she fails and learning to pick herself up from that. I really want to see that in season 2.
Yeah, I'm in for season 2, and I really want to see more of this town where it always feels like Halloween, because that's great for me. I love that.
Yeah.
I enjoy how they've done that and how they've like dressed that up. I really enjoyed that. Ray, I guess you want to see just to end this on a lighter note. I guess you want to see blueprints of the school, don't you?
I absolutely do. I want to see on flat paper, not on a sphere, not on a non-Euclidean surface or anything. I want to see how they think that all these pentagons can fit together. It doesn't happen. I'm not actually as angry about it as I make it sound, but like we built it into a thing now. So.
Yeah, I actually.
You're not as angry as. Sorry. No, I was going to say you're not as angry as the church, or the Temple of Satan, rather, about the statue of Baphomet, which we never actually talked about.
Yes,
how could
I
be that angry?
Yeah, they took particular issue with that, and I think, as Ray has said before, because we were having a talk about this before in like a WhatsApp thread, I think as Ray had actually mentioned before, yeah, it's kind of, you can see where they're coming from to be annoyed about the way that statue's been used and everything else. You can fully understand it, but at the same time, copyright issues for a deity. Yeah. But I mean,
it's not the only instance of them having caught trouble. I think there was also a painting in the background that they'd apparently plagiarized, and there's some copyright issue going on over that as well. Another goat imagery painting somewhere in the background of one of the scenes. So they're catching flack for this.
Yeah, but I think I was going to actually mention as well, Ray, that I did Google tessellated pentagrams. Mm-hmm. And you can tessellate pentagons even. You can
Show me how.
You can tessellate pentagons. If you Google tessellated pentagons...
Are you actually doing this now?
Yes, I'm Googling it, yeah. So, there is a way to tessellate pentagons, and it only works if they're irregular pentagons, and two of the
I don't want to hear an if. You've already said it. You've already ruined it. I don't want to hear an if. You can't do it.
I can do it. Let me show you.
We can put that in the show notes. Put that picture up at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm going to show you now, though. I'm going to get you the image. Just bear with me a second.
So if they're irregular, does that mean as a but not below?
It means, yeah. It means that...
It means that it's not a pentagon in the way that they put pentagons. They put all their weird shit into a pentagon.
Five-sided
it's not a regular
shape.
Pentagon.
It's a pentagon. It's a five-sided shape. Here's your tessellated pentagons.
Would Baphomet be happy in like a stretched out pentagon? Look at that. Look at that weird ass pentagon. That's not how it works.
Well, that's you know, technically it can be done. You can tessellate a five-sided shape, just so you know.
That's not what I said, but thank you for demonstrating.
There you go. But yeah, so I guess that has been the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
I didn't get a conclusion.
Oh, yeah. Leon, give us a conclusion. I'm cutting you out.
I'm going to run through a bunch of stuff that I'm looking forward to season 2, or more like what the fucks. So don't answer them, and then I'll save a thing. But what the fuck happened to the Kemper Witch storyline? The dead familiar lizards, and what the hell's up with Principal getting all Me Too horny in the last episode?
Love that.
There was zero fallout from Blackwood being outed as Prudence's father. I know that they kept it all a secret on that part, but zero fallout from that. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to have another kid. And so, real talk, Sabrina, is she going to care that, you know, she's going to find a spell to fix Roz's eyes or anything? Or, no. Mm-hmm. Okay. Ben Button, the pizza boy. So, this will be a spoiler for season 3 of Riverdale, but like, you'll fly to Greendale apparently to deliver pizzas. But I thought that was really cool that they actually had one character who's in both shows. Yeah. That was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to them explaining what's up with the twin in Sabrina, because we keep seeing 2 babies. Mm-hmm. Nick Scratch is totally the devil. I'm calling it.
Yep.
And like this whole love triangle thing. Harvey's mega doll. Yes. Nick Scratch. He's annoying as hell. So screw them both.
I wanted to be a lesbian.
Yes.
I think, you know, after talking about how witches were previously polyamorous, I think it's time they go there. I want some lesbian witches.
Yes.
Speaking for the team. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here for that. So like, yeah, listen. So like, Dorcas and Agatha get no reprimand for killing 5 mortals and bringing all that heat down on the Church of Night. Okay.
Sabrina straight up like slits a woman's throat. That's weird.
Yeah, well, I don't have time to get into that, but I do want to get into that. Like that, most shows would do that in season 5, and this show did it in fucking season 1. Wow.
They went there.
I thought there was going to be some Deus Ex Machina, and she wasn't going to do it in the end, but she did it. And yeah, what is it with female-led teen shows and having shitty boyfriend? I don't know, but
I think it's maybe art imitating life. Just kidding, but am I really?
Yeah.
But yeah, all in all, I really enjoyed the show. obviously I've got complicated thoughts about all different stuff, but that's pretty much me in every media. But yeah, I really enjoyed the show, and I'm really looking forward to season 2. And I've heard, well, not really whispers, but there's like people are hoping that something that they just are putting 2 and 2 together, that the show's going to come out on Valentine's Day instead of next October. So fingers crossed.
That could work.
Oh, cool. I like it.
That would be really
a really dark Valentine's.
That could work. Goth Valentine's Day. I'd like that.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. But what you were saying about Nick Scratch as well. Nick Scratch is totally a name that the devil would pick if he came to the mortal realm.
It's like both, isn't it? Because like Old Nick and then
Old Scratch.
Old Scratch, yeah. It's like
it's like he's young.
It's as much a name the devil would pick as the Joker calling himself Jack White. It's just that's how it that's how it is. It's just that's how it is. And if he's not Lucifer, then damn it, yeah. But no, I'm really excited for season 2. And clearly the rest of you are as well, which is really good. So yeah, that brings us to the end of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. So hope you've enjoyed our little chat about that. What we're going to do now is we're going to very, very quickly rattle through the pull list and maybe some closing thoughts that we have, and as in like what we're going to be up to between shows. So what are we looking forward to next is the thing. So I mean, I've got my pull list, which is things I'm looking forward to next, which is comics that I will be buying this week and next week. But for the rest of you, Vicky, have you got anything that you're looking forward to next to follow on from Sabrina or anything? Or are you still on a horror vibe, or is it something new? Or
everything that I wanted to watch kind of came out all at once around Halloween, including the new Halloween and the new Channel Zero. And, I guess I'm looking forward to the end of this season of American Horror Story and very little after that, sadly.
Cool. Leon, anything for you?
It's not out before the next episode, but we're on a witchy vibe. I want Suspiria. Give me Suspiria.
Yes, Suspiria. Yeah. Really looking forward to that. Ray, anything for you looking forward to?
I want to watch Suspiria, Mandy. I want to catch up on Ice Cream Man, which I heartily recommend.
Oh my God, catch up on Ice Cream Man already.
Don't stop. And I'm really looking forward to my bed now.
Yes. So yeah, I guess the stuff I'm looking forward to, I've seen Mandy and I've seen Halloween, and they're both great. And I've seen, I recommend those for. And Vicky, if you're going to read a horror comic, read Ice Cream Man. It's brilliant.
Great.
So for me, very quickly onto the pull list. So for this Wednesday, I have a comic called Outer Darkness, which is kind of like horror sci-fi, and it's looking at it. It's I'm not going to go to. I'll just read the blurb. The story is described as a sci-fi horror. It involves Captain Joshua Rigg of the starship Sharon in a future where the humans have colonized the galaxy. However, mysteries and horror wait as the Sharon encounter demonic possessions, hauntings, and cosmic horror as they embark on a desperate rescue mission into the outer darkness of space where everything wants to kill them. So it kind of, from the previews that I've seen, it kind of looks like Star Trek, but with a bit of a cosmic horror flavour on there as well. So I'm kind of looking forward to reading that. It looks really cool. And it's got this whole Star Trek aesthetic thing going on with the logo and everything when you look at the comic cover. And that is published on Image Comics. So I'll probably be talking about that next show. For November the 14th, we've got the end of Mr. Miracle with Mr. Miracle number 12. So that is the end of that particular run of Mr. Miracle. Cosmic Ghost Rider also comes to an end with Cosmic Ghost Rider number 5. And we've got Murder Falcon number 2, which I've talked about on a previous show. I've talked about Murder Falcon, and I am really looking forward to the second installment of this comic because it is metal as all hell, and I love it. Ray, anything on your pull list very quickly?
Mr. Miracle number 12, which is out on November the 14th. Ms. Marvel number 36, November the 14th. And Blackbird number 2, November 7th.
Yeah, so there we go. That has been the pull list. We've been Ace Comicals. You can find us on Twitter under @AceComicals. You can find us on Instagram @AceComicals. You can find us on Facebook under AceComicals. You can find us at www.acecomicals.com, which is kind of the hub for pretty much everything we do. You can find us to listen to us on Pocket Casts, Stitcher, Overcast, Spotify, TuneIn, and Castro. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts. We're just pretty much everywhere at this point. You can find me on Twitter under @Batou. That's BATTOU. And if you have a question for the show, you can send it to acecomicals@gmail.com, or you can send it to the inbox on Twitter for the Ace Comicals Twitter account. You can DM us, and we will answer your question on the next show. Ray, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter @Monkeh, MOONKEH.
And Leon, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter @Leon Everett.
Vicky, got anything you want to plug?
You can find me on Twitter as well @Vicki Madden. And if you happen to live in Edinburgh, there is going to be an Edinburgh Gothic event next Tuesday on Robert Louis Stevenson Day, 13th of November. So if you're around, come to the University of Edinburgh, find us. We'll be talking about Gothic things.
And if you are so inclined, you can donate the price of a coffee on our coffee site, which is again, you can find us under Ace Comicals, and all proceeds go to keeping the cast afloat and keeping the lights on. So that has been Ace Comicals, over and out.